read your emails in my head, so it means they're like, what?
I don't know.
Okay, so it's a little bit past 5. Call to order. Special session of the Auburn City Council workshop. Roll call.
Let's see, Councilmember Spokley is currently not here. Councilmember Berlant.
Here.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo. Present. Councilmember Riddell Harris is currently not here, and Mayor Amara.
Present. And Riddell Harris said she would be late, but she will be here. And Councilman Spokley is now here, present. So at this time, do we have any public comment? Anyone from the public want to say something?
So the way I read the agenda, this is public comment on the workshop.
Yes,
content, right? Okay,
thank you.
perfect. Okay, great. So my comments are focused around the fire department section here. My name's Robert Kisloff. I'm a resident of Auburn and also this year the chair of the Greater Auburn Area Fire Safe Council. If you're not terribly familiar with the council, I hope that we'll have an opportunity to speak more to the city on this as well. But there are 2 key areas are really focused on our public education and outreach and program development. And I think from that standpoint, just first off, in general, want to offer us as a resource and a channel for the city in both those areas. But I think particularly as it pertains to the to the strategic plan really around outreach and education. I think there's a real opportunity for the Fire Safe Council to participate and help with this. A couple of points, I think, from the strategic plan in terms of the goals around education efforts, the marketing initiatives and education outreach materials. We do this as well and can certainly coordinate work with and support the chief with that. There is a mention, one of the top bullet on page 78 of that addresses encouraging community members' participation in fire safe council formation. Obviously, the council here covers the city of Auburn as well as the areas of Bowman, Penryn, and Newcastle. So I don't know if this perhaps pertained more to the formation of fire-wise communities, or if this, or if not, perhaps maybe the city can look at maybe some other opportunities for how, to take this particular role and maybe focus more on the coordination efforts. But I think other areas really that I support also as a community member, the Green Waste Program that's outlined in here. The citywide, the pilot of the citywide chipper program, I think is really important and should remain in the strategic plan and something really for the city to look at as well. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has public comment?
Mayor Amara, I will show the public comment I received via email. There's no more in person.
Thank you.
This public comment was received and was emailed to the council and is also provided on the dais for your review and is available in my office as well. Page 2. And that completes public comment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, then at this time, we will have our city manager introduce tonight's agenda.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, tonight's the second presentation regarding the overall city strategic plan. Tonight, we're going to focus on public safety. As the council's aware, there are 8 priority areas in the strategic plan, and public safety represents a number of key areas, everything from one of the highest priorities, safety. The second is the idea of sustainability. And third is just overall fiscal health of the city. Tonight, I've asked both of the chiefs to come in, give an overview of their strategic plans as it relates to our organization. And a lot of this is going to be cascading into the city's budget. So with that, why don't I let Chief Canan take over. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members, Ryan Canan, your Chief of Police. And tonight, as the City Manager highlighted, we will be talking about our strategic plan for the police department over the next 3 years as well. Really, we identified 5 areas of our strategic plan, 1 being our personnel, 2 being outreach, 3 being training, technology and equipment, and overall wellness for our employees being the 5 categories. And here we go. So just high level, we created in 2020 and 2021, we rolled out our new mission statement, team of dedicated professionals relentlessly protecting the innocent and improving the quality of life for our community through compassion and partnerships in order to preserve justice and equality. And I really think that part of that is the improving the quality of life for the community is one of the major functions that we do. And we do that through our core values: professionalism, respectful ownership, integrity, and empathy. Empathy being one of those ones where we strive to comfort those we serve at a time when they are the most vulnerable. I mean, that's part of our job. We see people when they are at their worst. We often say we don't get invited to birthday parties, but what we do end up is at families when they're at their time of need. And here we'll kick off with the APD team. Our team members are the most important aspect of our organization, and having valued and effective employees are key to delivering a high performing and skilled government. And in coordination with the City Manager's Office and Administrative Services, we want to identify opportunities to increase police personnel overall. I know that was a discussion that we've had at the previous City Council meeting. We were talking about strategic plans. How do we make that happen? As you can see there, I mean, key components working with the City Manager's Office and obviously Administrative Services. But we also talk about things, reserve staffing. When I got here over 3.5 years ago, oftentimes what we found ourselves was often trying to fill our full-time employee vacancies. And by building up really what this would be is our farm team of reserve officers at level 1s, level 2s, and level 3s, reserve officers to fill some of those vacancies that we have. We've seen success with that over the last 3 years of having vacancies. We were able to fill full-time employee vacancies pretty quickly with our level 1 reserves into full-time. The development of our people through that has been key. We currently have 2 level 2 reserves, and we have 1 level 1 reserve, and we're actually getting ready to bring on 1 level 3 reserve officer with our within our program. 2 is dispatch staffing. This is not one that's often talked about, but this is a group of team members that we have that are often behind the scenes. These are the first people that you talk to when you call 911 or even call our non-emergency number. And we want to make sure that we continue to bring on talented people who can get through this. This is a difficult job, listening to people when they're in their most distress. So it is finding those people that are the right fit for the organization. But we want to take the same model that we did with the reserve officers and make the same staffing model in our comm center. And that's by bringing on per diem dispatchers or part-time dispatchers, as well as creating classifications such as a call taker. Something that we can take just focuses on actually taking the call, so we can teach people incrementally on how to be a full-time dispatcher for us. And it rolls into item number 3 there, which is record staffing. The reality is our dispatchers play dual roles, and they do both. They dispatch and they deal with our records management side of it. And the records side of it is key to actually getting our cases and our reports to the district attorney's office. to make sure that they file timely, make sure that we actually can take bad guys to jail and they actually do jail time. They also deal with the citations that we issue. They work with the front counter and the community when they come in requesting reports. So again, this is a key component of it. And our focus is to bring on part-time records technicians. And currently we have one and another one going through the process to fill that vacancy. And then fourth is our community service officer staffing. Community service officers for us play multiple roles. They wear multiple hats between working, helping patrol to animal control services, to property and evidence, and kind of other duties as assigned. Certainly some of our community service officers focus on the homeless effort and our community action team. So again, by doing this, bringing on community service officers in a part-time capacity, that again helps us develop our next set of, could be dispatchers, but also could be police officers. And so by bringing in all this different talent and all these different mechanisms and avenues, we can keep our staff full and ensure we can continue to serve the community. And moving on for training for success later on, I'll be doing my annual report. And one of the things we'll highlight is just how young our staff is. And we have to be able to train our folks with contemporary training, both inside in-house training and also training outside from other entities. You see they're 100% tier training. So we kicked off 3 years ago what we call the tier training program that identified different levels of training for different aspects for us. So a new hire is going to get all the same training, could be things in radar, LiDAR, basic traffic collision. And the goal there is to get 100% tiered training in that first tier. Second is our 100% performance review. This is part of really being able to develop our people through annual evaluations. We create a 12-month coaching session. So every month our staff gets a coaching session with their supervisor, and that will roll into their 1-year anniversary or their 1-year performance review. We'll be identifying SMART goals and objectives. And then we roll into our 90% performance policy performance. So the Lexo policy actually allows us to track the what we call daily training bulletins, but also the policy acknowledgements. And our goal here is to reach 90% when we audit that. And then finally, over 40 hours of advanced employee training. And I just started this presentation on this slide with the notion that we have a very young staff. 15, almost over half of our staff have been here at the Auburn Police Department for less than 3 years. And that'll continue to change even over the next 6 months or so. And then implement an annual calendar. So monthly training for staff, identifying the budgetary needs to reach this goal, and as well as developing in-house instructors. We have the opportunity to, again, this rolls into the previous slide, which is our team. By teaching in-house instructors, we're actually developing our staff and giving them opportunities for continued development, continued growth, and seeing actually a lot of things that other agencies don't provide those same opportunities. So recruitment and retention is a good highlight off that one. Reaching our community engagement obviously plays a pivotal role. One of the first things I heard when I first got here as your chief, the discussion was, well, other agencies are doing it better. And I asked why. The answer was because we see it on Facebook. And, immediately we went to Facebook, went to social media platforms and started highlighting all of the work that the officers and staff have been doing. And I think by doing those things, and I don't just think, but I truly believe that has changed a lot of the belief from the community on what it is that we were doing or we're not doing. Now we'll continue those efforts. As you can see there, the 4 areas: the community connectivity, community outreach, youth outreach, and social media. We want to be able to highlight, we want to be able to engage. And, one of the things we've seen on Facebook and the various pages that are out there is just how much our community, in their support actually comes to our defense all at the same time, identifying what it is that we're doing out there, even talking about jurisdictional lines. And through this reaching our community, we're better educating the community members that are out there and letting them know exactly what it is that we're doing, why we do certain things, and how we're accomplishing that. And you'll see there the youth outreach really develop stronger relationships. We want to identify better strategies to engage and connect with our youth. That's just not through the school resource officers, but it's the various programs that are out there. Working with Auburn Union School District, some of the folks, but also working with the various groups that are out there, that programs like Kids-a-Palooza that took place last year, and being able to participate that at with ARD. So those are just some of the ways that we want to be able to do that through social media, through Coffee with a Cop and other programs like that. Investing in our employees. Last city council meeting, we talked about this at a citywide level, and highlight the fact that we want to make sure that our people are not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy, financially, and emotionally. This last 4 months, 2 retired police chiefs have committed suicide, and 1 high-level executive from another law enforcement agency in the state committed suicide. And I bring that up because that is a issue that law enforcement across the country is facing, is that we want to make sure that our people are not just dealing with everybody else's issues, but also we have an opportunity to take care of them and deal with their issues as well. And the reality is, as law, we are not the only ones that are facing that. Our fire partners as well. And so we really want to focus on this. And it's something that is finally coming up and finally is being less of a stigma talking about that. For police officers, we never got to deal with our own issues. We always had to deal with somebody else's. And I will tell you that this is not a normal job, where the fact is that as officers, we're dealing with things, we're seeing things that, the average person does not have to deal with. I made a comment earlier about not being invited to birthday parties, which we don't, which is fine. But the reality is we deal with people when they are at their worst. We are there when a victim becomes a victim, where we break up families, and those are the realities. And it's not by our own doing, but it's by a decision of somebody else. So I take this and that mantra, and this is why it's so important to invest in our people, but it's also so important to engage in the community and let them know exactly what it is that we're doing as well. And, last year we rolled out what we call the APD Fit. We probably have one of the best gyms in this region. I think we rival most anybody. But a goal there is to get our officers into the gym, an average of 30 minutes a shift. And it doesn't take long. They can jump on the treadmill. They can do a wide variety of stuff. And this is not just for the officers, but our dispatchers. We actually purchased a treadmill for the communication center that can be used, and finding unique ways to do that. Youth fitness, working with the Auburn Union School District. One of the programs we want to roll out is really engaging with the youth from a fitness perspective and bringing that into the schools, because the schools have to meet certain criteria that they have to do at the elementary level. So if we can do both, we can help the kids, engage with the kids, developing those relationships to becoming role models at the same time, helping out our staff. Wellness. This is something I think is a little unique. I mentioned at the last city council, again, talking about our businesses. We have so many different wellness modalities here in the city of Auburn, and being able to bring in them to the city and to invest in our employees, but also here's an opportunity for us to reinvest into those businesses as well. And then technology services. There's a lot of different programs that are out there. There's trucks and there's trailers that will do full on wellness checks of individuals. They'll check their heart, check their, a lot of different other aspects of the health. So finding those and taking advantage of those. And then advanced technology. Number one there is a training simulator. We, as a young staff, even, for the city of Auburn, using this simulator to improve the safety, enhance their effectiveness, and being able to do that on a regular basis is absolutely within our grasp as an organization. A training simulator for us costs about $43,000, and to just happen to do the research, we could pay for that over the course of 2 fiscal years. But what that brings to our officers, allows us to put them in a wide variety of simulations that they may not get here in the city of Auburn per se, but certainly not at the same time frame that they would get maybe from a bigger, busier agency. Technology review, making sure that we're always looking at new technology that's out there. An example, two of the programs that we're looking at right now, getting ready to roll out. One is called QHIT. It is a customer service feedback tool for law enforcement. That allows, if we go to a call, allows, a text message goes to that person, much like if you went to a restaurant or some other service, you get a text says, hey, how was our service? And that gives the individual an opportunity to rate us and let us know, essentially providing that immediate feedback to us. And it gives us a better snapshot of what our community rating really is. 3, policing symposiums, staying knowledgeable on industry standards, seeing as this changes, what technology, things like body cameras, although we have those, but what's the next iteration of that? And then 4, we talk about using technology to better ourselves and better the organization and make us more efficient. Very much what we saw when we implemented our new CAD and RMS system is being able to use that data to improve our services. And here again, first action step commitment. We talked about the strategic planning session of the city to roll out the two new technologies to improve our efficiency and external customer service. The other technology was what we call Live 911. And that'll allow the officers working the streets to hear the 911 call as it's coming in. It allows the dispatcher to focus on doing their part, and it provides the officer with really real-time information as it's coming in. And our first opportunities, we talk about community outreach in several fashions, the Coffee with a Cop, various service clubs, and then foot patrols. That's one of our objectives and measurements as well, is ensuring that we get about 2 hours of foot patrol each essentially for us a pay period. So every 2 weeks in that cycle. So those are some of our measurements and some of our goals that we look to accomplish over the next 3 years. And then we want to be able to celebrate our people. And we'll talk about that during the annual report. But, as an agency, we have a very professional, very hardworking organization that are doing a lot of the work out there. I know sometimes many people say they don't see us all the time or see us out and about, but they're in various neighborhoods, various business districts, and they're responding to all their calls for service. That's it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions with the understanding there is going to be a report later on?
There is, yes. All things PDs today.
Are you from the council, are you asking? Or
Yes,
for the public?
from the
Oh,
council.
the council. I just had a question. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the work that you put into the police department strategic plan and going through it again today. One question I just had with regards to staffing, and this is on page 95 of the plan. You talk about CSO staffing and increase the community service officers by 2 part-time positions. And I just wondered, why not 1 full-time person? Are you looking to increase? We have a part-time person now, and they want to remain part-time. I was just kind of trying to understand why 2 part-times versus 1.
Sure. So, we want to be very fluid with some of these things and be able to change it as we need it. We currently have 1 CSO. Well, we have 2 allocated full-time CSOs now.
Okay.
One's assigned to patrol, which has been Connor Johnson. The other one was assigned to property and evidence, and that was Deb Nelson. So with those 2 spots, one was kind of in-house helping us out with the administrative stuff, as well as crime scene response, as well as animal control. And then Connor, that position really focused on the homeless enforcement side of it, our CAT team, but also helping out with patrol. So what we want to do is we've had an opportunity to bring somebody else on who has a lot of experience in the health and human services side of it, but working from a part-time position. And then another one is, someone who wants to be a future police officer and bringing them on to be able to fill various roles for us.
Okay.
So in this case, it's kind of where we want to see ourselves, because then we can be flexible with their time as well and be able to plug them in where we need them.
So both creative staffing.
Yes,
So, okay.
creative staffing. That's a good term.
The other one was just with regards to code enforcement. And, I believe our code enforcement staff is 3/4 time or half time?
Currently, it's 3/4 time.
3/4 time.
Yeah.
Has there been any consideration to make that a full-time position? And, I mean, I know we kind of talk about that when with public safety, fire also, but I don't really see that addressed so much in your strategic plan, but I've wondered how much you've given, thought to that, making that more of making a full-time person, having their 1 full-time person.
Yeah, I think one of I would love to see the full-time side of code enforcement as well. And I think something that's just working through our current model right now. Absolutely. We know I can, in conversations with the fire chief and myself, is having those conversations, knowing that the way the city is laid out, the resources are needed there as well. And I think that's part of probably his presentation with the community reduction role.
Yeah, I have no problem with a partnership there, but I mean, I could even see more than one full-time dedicated person in code enforcement, especially on the fire side. And I know there's a lot of interest in that from the community's perspective as well. So I want
Yes.
to take advantage of asking you about that. I think that those were the only two questions I really had on the strategic plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry for coming in a little late. Babysitter took a little while. Thank you for your presentation. I had a chance to look it over beforehand. I wanted to say that I really like the outreach portion of this. I think it's really important to be able to do that outreach and all the work you're doing with the kids. I definitely am seeing at the school. I'm always shocked when I'm walking out and the police officers are walking in to do some kind of presentation or something. There's really been a really good presence at the elementary school my kids are at, so I'm sure other elementary schools as well. I also really think that the wellness portion is key and important. I think it's important for all of our staff. Do we help to pay for gym memberships and things like that for staff at all? Something to keep in mind for benefits. Not everyone can, take time out of their job or have that flexibility, but they might have something near their house that they could do. I'd like to encourage not just the police department, but everyone to be able to have access to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe as a response, one of the things that the chief and I have talked, I will tell you, the chief's one slide here talking about wellness was something that just rung in Cedar Point. We've talked about the idea of trying to implement some type of a wellness program. The chief mentioned kind of the multifaceted approach to it, whether it's fitness, whether it's mental health, whether it's other things, the idea that somebody we could provide some type of benefit for our employees to do business with. It could be everything from yoga to karate or whatever, but it would be that type of benefit. So I can tell you that we are looking into that as part of the upcoming budget.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the last question I had was around staffing. Do you anticipate in this having a hard time getting the staffing that we need? Do we have barriers having to do with salary issues and benefits that are going to prevent us from getting there? And also I know we talk about how because we're small, we're a training ground that end up moving people to other places,
Sure.
but then I know a lot of the work that's done is pairing up a less experienced person with an experienced person. And if we have two inexperienced people, then that probably creates more issues with training. How do you see that all looking in the future?
So there's a lot of questions,
Sorry.
comments. Well, I think, we do have the number of vacancies, that we've been filling. We've also had a number of retirements. And I think that's some of the stuff that hasn't been really discussed. I think we've had 9 retirements in 3 years or 3.5 years just before I got here, started that. And so that's what left some of these vacancies. But we've been able to fill them through, like I said, building this reserve program, having those positions there. And then could we turn into this training ground piece? Absolutely. In 3.5 years, we haven't had anybody leave from a sworn side of it, haven't left for another agency. Now, we absolutely could. I mean, one of those things that I've talked about since I got here, the reality is, yes, as a smaller agency, we don't have all the programs, all the departments that some other agencies have. If someone wants to go be a part of a SWAT team or do something like that, you're absolutely right. They're not going to be able to do that for us, right? But the goal there is really to, it goes back to anything, treat our employees, so they don't want to leave. But when they do, that they talk highly of us. It's a conversation I've had with multiple people is that, every police department is different. And the reality is someone might leave out here to go somewhere else for an opportunity. But if they're talking about us in a positive fashion and they didn't leave because of a negative culture, they might get to another agency and tell someone, hey, I left because I wanted to do all these things that Auburn didn't offer, but this is what they offer me, right? And you might have someone else who looks back and says, well, shoot, I'm ready for a change of pace, or I'm ready for this and come up here. And, our recent promotion to Sergeant Neary earlier last year, came from SAC PD with over 20 years experience. So it's one of those things that we have those opportunities and we have to find those fits for us. Yes, the officers that we're hiring right now are young. They lack a lot of that experience, which is, it's okay because a lot of us are dealing with that out of the 400 plus agencies in the state. But so we have to find those, what makes us unique. I go all the way back to the discussion of training trainers. Most agencies don't, and training in general, most agencies don't spend the money on their personnel the way we have that opportunity. Sending our officers, sending our dispatchers, sending our staff to training, outside training that most agencies don't even get. Most employees don't get from other agencies. Developing an instructor core of all the different elements that we do is an opportunity as a recruitment tool to bring people in here. I certainly know the city managers and the admin services are moving forward on the classification and compensation study, which I think is ideal as we move forward. But to say that, we become a training ground or something else from the law side of it is currently not true. I'm not saying that could change tomorrow, right? Knock on wood. But I think that's a lot of that discussion is how do we ensure that we're recruiting, we're still recruiting, we're still getting people to fill those, still bringing in reserve officers, that I truly believe comes to a culture. And if our staff are doing the recruiting, because then we're still winning as far as I look at that. So we definitely continue to navigate all those things. And to council member or vice mayor down Calvillo's comment, it's flexible staffing, creative staffing.
Yeah, I appreciate how good you've been about all of those things. And thank you for bringing that or highlighting all those items.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of questions, Chief. Thank you very much for your plan. I did appreciate reading it. Back on staffing though, so where do you stand right now with your current structure from a staffing standpoint? Are you fully staffed today?
No, the short answer is no. So we have 3 vacancies currently that we're filling, and the way we've done this and some backstory. So we had a recent retirement, an industrial retirement with Stan Hamlin, who retired earlier this year. So that created a vacancy. Angela McCullough, she retired at the end of last year. And then we have our SRO position that we got the grant fund for. So those 3 positions are positions that we, kind of were thrown on us to hire and to bring on some folks. We currently have 1 of those vacancies filled with Connor Johnson. He will finish his academy at the beginning of May. So he will fill one of those vacancies. We have another one who will be starting fill those vacancies at the end of this month. And so that will fill one of those vacancies. And the third one is we have some folks going through backgrounds right now and they're finalizing the backgrounds. So the short answer is no, but that's where we are with staffing.
But it sounds like you're pretty close to, the replacements are all in the works, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. And then in looking at your strategic plan, you talk about year 1 staffing needs and reserve staffing. Those are paid positions, correct?
So we pay our level 1s. So when they're full, they're off FTO, off field training, and they're working, then we pay them an hourly rate. Level 2s, level 3s do not get paid.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. You're looking at 3 of those reserve officers?
We're looking to fill 3 at each one of those different levels. So between level 1, 2, and 3, because ideally, so to go through the different academies, the different modules, we can bring them on and we can get them through those backgrounds, which typically take up to 2 months just to get them through a background. So ideally, if we're kind of bringing them on as level 3s, we're also kind of building some, the way we look at it, a little bit of a loyalty perspective and getting those individuals their foot in the door here, and with them going through our training, them becoming level 1s. And then again, if we have a vacancy, we can slide a level 1 reserve into a full-time spot, or at the same time, maybe they find an opportunity somewhere else. But it's one of those things where we're trying to build our reserve program to ensure that we have our pick as we continue to fill those. And inevitably we'll have vacancies. I mean, whether they're injuries or vacations or something like that.
Got it. And then on dispatch staffing, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the term, but 2 per diem dispatchers?
So
What's a per diem dispatcher?
So essentially a per diem is a part-time dispatcher. And that's someone who has some experience already, but is not currently working full-time somewhere else. And so ideally, if they've gone through an academy or worked at another agency for over a year and they have that experience, we can bring them on as a part-time employee. And then they can fill some of those vacancies that we have due to vacations or, a vacancy in general.
And record staffing, same for those two part-time people kind of backfilling for vacations and folks that are out, or?
Yes,
Would that equate to one FTE or?
it doesn't, because they talked to from the administrative services side of it, but typically it's just covers would be the salary side of it. There's no benefits as part of the part-time.
Got it. Okay. So in addition to the reserve officers, it sounds like you're suggesting that we need to add some dispatch flexibility for you.
So we currently already have those positions classifications created. So per diem dispatchers, as well as the part-time records technicians. So we have those already created. One that'll be probably coming in the future will be that call taker position. Ideally, that way we can move people through the various classifications as needed. And it's the same thing with like I said, the record side of it as well. So we have those positions. We created those last year to move some of these positions around.
So how many total new FTEs are we talking about? for
So
the police?
this year, the 4 that you see there is actually no full-time employees. What that is pretty much, it's all part-time employees. But I know there's been discussions on kind of the unmet needs of the police department as it relates to full-time employees, and some of the discussions of the needs not being met, maybe in the community's eyes, but as well as some of the internal operating opportunities as well.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Appreciate
Mhm.
that. On the advanced technology side of things, the training simulator, that's the first time in my time on the council I've heard that be brought up. Is that, I think you mentioned a potential cost associated with this. Seems like a great thing, great idea. Are there agencies around us that we could partner with to defer some of those costs or share some of those costs with something like this?
There are some, I think some of the agencies around us have simulators, but having one in-house honestly makes it easier for our officers to use it as opposed to having to leave somewhere else. Because it's one of those things where we talk about personnel side of it. Having it in-house actually allows them to use it here. They don't have to go off campus. They don't have to leave the city, and they can get their ongoing training right here. And I know initially the cost sounds quite a bit, but by having a young staff, I think there's a cost benefit ratio there of allowing these officers to deal with use of force incidents, deal with a wide variety of issues like mental health, and being able to do that while they're working for an hour a day allows that training to be pretty exponential.
Sounds fun, actually.
So this one we're looking at is actually, it's a virtual simulator. So you wear the goggles, you have all the equipment and everything else. And, there's another piece of this is it ties into our community outreach. A lot of the simulators, are fixed locations. They're 3 giant screens. You're setting up all the different computer system, everything else. Well, this one actually allows you to travel. And, part of that model is going out to the community and letting the community experience what we do via these VR simulation goggles. So not only is it about our training, but it's also about our continued outreach and continued education of the community.
Excellent. The last quick question I had, you touched on it in your presentation. I didn't actually see it written down. Maybe I just missed it, but you talked about the community outreach and the 2 hours, I think you said 2 hours per pay period of foot patrol.
Yes.
That's visiting the businesses, walking the streets. Is that happening today?
To some extent, not as much as I know the council and the community, certainly the business communities have asked for. Obviously, I do that quite a bit. I see that as one of my roles that I can do to offset, some of those concerns from the community. We try to be seen downtown and Old Town, but the officers can't and don't always get to that. We can't be everywhere all the time. I know later on I'll talk about our crime and traffic reduction model. We focus on one area as a department, that's where we focus on. But when there's another issue somewhere else, we have to change those priorities and change where we're at. Because again, we can't be everywhere. We're looking at 2 officers on the street, and that's an officer plus a supervisor. And that's typically what we deploy. Depending on their staffing levels, we try to get 2 officers and a supervisor. But again, it goes back to we can't be everywhere all the time. But that's certainly our goal.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Again, appreciate the report.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And I just have a brief couple questions here. I had questions on staffing as well, but, and you answered the questions. But with regard, so it sounds like you rely on the reserve officers to kind of fill your staffing at some point in time. Is that, did I get that right?
We do, with the reserve program side of it, we really look at that as as a farm team for us. As we're developing people with our culture, with our with knowledge of how we operate and what we do, familiarity with the community. And I mean, would be ideal if that's how we're bringing people up.
Good. And right now, are you having trouble getting reserve officers? Is it hard to find them or recruit them?
So far, we're doing okay. I mean, we're doing okay. We have, like I said, 1 level 3 it's coming on. We have 2 level 2s, and then we have 1 level 1 currently. And so ideally, as they go through the academy, part of our problem was during COVID, the academies actually stopped. And, when they weren't running their academies, we're not getting reserves out of it. And so that was some of the trouble and some of the discussion too. There's, from a cultural perspective, there's a lot of people that don't want to be police officers right now. So the academies didn't have a whole lot of people in them. And as a result, less candidates that are out there, and, 400 agencies in the state of California are competing over, the same small pool of candidates.
Sure, of course. And I understand from your last job, you had police on patrol. I'm going to ask you a little more about that later, because I think that's an important piece that we need. Operationally, I see what you need here, but I think we need to look in the future, in the near future, and I want a discussion on that as well, so that we have a prevention aspect. And so anyway, I'll be asking that later.
You're referring to the problem-oriented policing program.
That's it.
Yes.
Problem-oriented policing. Thank you. And then you indicate that there's an increase, conduct 2 hours of every 2 weeks. That's not very much. I'd like to increase that as well, but no, but overall, I think what you have going is important for what we have right now, but I think we need to build on it. And then I'm obviously older than many of your recruits, but do you think it is more beneficial? I know in the legal practice, they have, simulated cases that I can do on the computer and all that. But I find a lot of time I get a lot more out of things when I go a week seminar or to a week training. So do you think it's better to have that technology, have them trained that way, or do you do both ways? Or, what is your honest opinion?
The ideal way is both. You have to be able to do both, because to your point, talking about seminars and the outside training,
Yes.
you learn a different perspective. You learn what other agencies are doing. In law enforcement, oftentimes we are stealing from other agencies, ideas or how things are going. And we get that idea and we kind of make some changes and make it our own. And you do that by visiting, various trainings, right? Talking to other people who might be in the same position you are, or being able to experience different things. So my belief is you do both. And, one of our goals and objectives is 40 hours of outside training for all staff throughout the year, in addition to the use of what we would have if we had that simulator.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions? And thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
presentation. I think we have the fire chief now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, fellow council members. For the record, Dave Spencer, your fire chief. In the brevity of time, I'll try to move through this relatively quickly for you. This is a lot of material that you have already seen, and I just want to continue to underscore the importance of how we approach our strategic plan with regard to the 5 E's, education, enforcement, engineering, emergency response, and economic incentives. Again, we're coming from a prioritization and leveraging our existing efforts. And then the next key element of that is evaluating our data for effective efforts. We continue to look at the infrastructure as we roll out some of these new programs and initiatives, and then certainly trying to bring that messaging to the community stakeholders, such as our fire safe councils and our Firewise communities. as well as our service clubs and town hall meetings. So as we roll in over this next 2 years, trying to initiate that wildland urban interface inspection program again, as you know, in the absence or as a result of COVID and not having that personal interaction with our community members, we went to a self-attestation mailer. And so now we're in a position where we can go back and engage in our community and provide that face-to-face education. As we move forward with that, we want to mandate defensible space and implement the AB 38 language into our municipal code. We'll look at the FireWise liaison and the abatement enforcement. And again, we talk about the chipper program, trying to implement that. Now, I will say that there's a fair amount involved in that program. And so that speaks back to the infrastructure that needs to be in place so that we don't start and stop or have a clunky or underdeveloped program coming forward. Specific to our engineering efforts, we are committed. As you know, we've had a tremendous changeover in staff. So we're making sure that all of our staff currently are trained up in how to execute a wildland urban interface inspection for our community. Next, we'll be collecting data with regard to home hardening efforts. And this is really important because as our homeowners take these steps to do different types of things to ensure that their home is safer, we want to capture that information so that we can document that. One of the things that I came away with from my last conference was the idea that all over this country, we need to come to one standard as we approach this type of effort. And then as we have that standard, then we can point back to these large scale fires and say those folks that have done those efforts are actually making a difference. And I think that's how we get the buy-in from our community to say there is some cost involved for the homeowner. There is some effort and some sweat equity, but when it results in your home still standing, that's a significant event. We'll continue to educate on our fire resistive landscape and ensuring that we're using the right type of landscaping. And then again, moving forward with the municipal code update to reflect the AB 38 defensible space. With regard to enforcement efforts, again, we're going to continue with our proactive fuels risk evaluation. And we do that regularly as we drive around the city. Our folks are looking for those things. And as we come into this season, you know that we are in a dry time, even with the little bit of precipitation that we've experienced now. We'll continue to see this drought last for the foreseeable future. One of the things that we're looking forward to do is capture with our waste folks the green waste tons per acre that we're being able to measure. Again, it's a measurement tool. It's a data that we can capture and provide some kind of analytics that go with that. And then again, as was commented in our public comment, again, looking at that pilot program. And really, I want to make sure that you understand that how I see it in the vision is that we develop it. We do a test run of that, evaluate it again, and work out any issues or improvements that can make it run smoother. Our education efforts, again, our annual safety messaging campaign, so that we're ready to go and ensure that our community knows where we're at as the season runs through, ensuring that the community understands the benefits of a FireWise community, and ensuring that we can get a fire watch program that's initiated with our red flag program. That's a value added service that we can use through volunteers that will help us with early detection and again, that general messaging throughout the city. And our fire behavior map education, you have seen many of the fire maps that we produced, and I think those are very pointed and something that every one of our community members need to understand and look at. When we talk about emergency response on these very high fire danger days, we need to upstaff to be able to have folks in place so that we can have that early response with early detection. This next year, we're going to be implementing the closest resource concept with our partner agencies. And that is very similar to what our law partners have done with the CAD to CAD recognition and being able to ensure that we have the right resources and responding quickly. We'll be updating our emergency communications and then evaluating the risk neighborhoods affected by the wildland urban interface. with regard to economic incentives, as we talked about earlier, capturing the data on structure survival due to home hardening. That's really a key element that we're looking for. I've shared with this council in other presentations about some of the work that the SIG group out of Denver has been doing, and we're continuing to look at that as they continue to produce that good data for us. We'll continue with the Middle Fork hydroelectric projects through grants. And then, of course, as we look at the insurance industry and their standards, fortunately, Councilwoman down Calvillo invited me to the SAC area Region 4 conference or a meeting rather, and I was able to connect with one of our legislators who sits on the insurance committee. And so we've engaged in conversation or continuing to work through that to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And if we can get our legislators to agree on a standard, I think it will make a tremendous difference for us, not only for our community, for the entire region and the entire state. And then certainly we'll continue with our FEMA grant applications, and we'll do that year over year as we have. Rest assured, we continue to have limitations, and those limitations continue to be sustainable city funding. And that is certainly high on our mind. And we continue to work through that with the city manager's office as well as our administrative services. Time is always an issue for us. We continue to see somewhat of a resistive culture, but I think that's changing as we continue our education process. I think as we continue to communicate out effectively, we're beginning to have a much more robust conversation and really an increased compliance. And then we'll continue to see increased costs for property owners as they continue to do this work for home hardening and defensible space. But again, we're trying to draw that data and that parallel to what that work looks like and the return on investment. And with that, that concludes my comments. I ran through that a little quickly, but I want to make sure that we got an opportunity to share that information with you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Spokely?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Chief, same thing I always ask you about the enforcement side of things. You're probably gearing up to get letters out to our frequent offenders of folks who don't take care of their private property. I still would love to see, and I don't know if it's something we need to well, I know it's something we're going to need to coordinate with the city attorney, but some way that we can penalize those people who are those frequent offenders. We year after year go out and clean up their properties for them because they neglect to do that. And it comes out of either grant funds that you guys are successful in obtaining, but those can be used on other public lands, railroad, other places, in my opinion. So I didn't see a ton about any ideas, any strategies, any ways that we could more poignantly go after those repeat offenders, but we all know who they are. They're the same folks year after year, and they need to do their part. So great plan, but on that point, I would like to see a little more time and energy put to figure out how we can deal with those folks, because they put all of the rest of us at risk.
Understood.
Maybe not a question. Sorry about that, Madam Mayor.
Legit. Thank you very much. Councilman Riddell Harris? Councilwoman.
Thank you for your report. It was great. I feel like you've done a really good job over the last year driving home a lot of these points, and we've discussed a lot of these issues, so I don't really have a lot of questions about them. I do think that we need to figure out the funding piece, and that's going to be a big piece. So I'm excited to see what the Wildfire and Public Safety Advisory Committee comes back with, because I think that we need to figure out that sustainable source of funding, because I wish we could fund it all, but we just don't have the resources. So I think that'll be great. And hopefully they come up with some good suggestions, but I think that this is something that you've done a great job of communicating. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. And we've talked multiple times. I talked to the police chief as well. Just along the lines with what Councilman Spokely was talking about on the enforcement side, I thought that we were actually able to levy or at least get some reimbursements back for the cost. Is that not the case, Gary? I mean, haven't we been able to get some of that?
That is the case. Yeah. So we've worked with the code enforcement officer and with the chief and his department. There's two different processes. One's in the health and safety code. It's one where there's hearings here before the city council. The city's used that in the past. The other is an administrative code enforcement process. Give notice to abate. If they don't, the city can get a warrant, enter the property and do the work. And then either an assessment or a lien comes back to the council, then goes on the property. Assessment is collected with the taxes every year.
Yes.
A lien doesn't get collected until the property's sold. So get the money
Yeah,
quickly.
I thought that we were doing that, so I just wanted to kind of raise that because we can always do more on and again, on the enforcement side, and I talked about code enforcement. It'd be great to be able to have that individual that would sort of float between the two departments. I know that's something I'm hoping that our fire committee is looking at, the public safety, they're looking at all those aspects. Because to me, that's very important. There's a lot of issues that really go across both departments, and it'd be great to have someone that could do that enforcement on both sides. Just really, kind of get in the weeds a little bit. On the evacuation plan, you say you want to identify, evaluate effectiveness and current evacuation plan in conjunction with APD. And I'm just hoping we're going to include signage on that. I know we kind of talked about this a long time ago. We put some little signage up about the evacuation routes, but when we're evaluating the plan, that we make sure that we have appropriate signage, and not only that people understand, because I think the little E means evacuation, but not everyone knows what that little red E is. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. Otherwise, I appreciate your time and energy in putting forth your elements of the strategic plan. Look forward to working.
Great, thank you.
Councilman,
So you don't get to comment. Sorry.
Well, actually, I was gonna
I was,
say.
I was almost going to go before you, but it's okay. I'll let you go.
Go ahead. Well, I was just gonna be real quick and say, I apologize missing this. Obviously, I did go 2 weeks ago and gave you my list of additions. So hopefully you can recycle the last meeting. But I do agree. I think some additional code enforcement is critical. And even if we need to discuss that in our next budget budget talk, so we should do that. So yeah, please pull the item from 2 weeks ago. Ditto. Thank you.
Yes, and I think a lot of us talked to you 2 weeks ago, but what I do want to emphasize what Councilman Berlant said 2 weeks ago. The red flag program, it says year 2. I think that should be year 1, or I think we discussed that. Seems very important. And can we collaborate with other entities in terms of the enforcement? Again, what's important to me too is also trying to collaborate with other entities so that we can, and jurisdictions, so that we can enforce, no smoking down in the canyon, maybe no driving certain days. To me, that's important. I would like to see more collaboration with other jurisdictions for us to be very preventative. So that's my take. And again, I think you have everybody, or I think everybody spoke a couple weeks ago very at length. So is there anyone from the public that has any questions though? Okay. Well, then with that, I will conclude and we will take a 5-minute break. We do have some individuals here who are ready for the proclamation, but we'll take we'll be back about 5 after 6.
I'm not- My daughter doesn't.
Have a call to order, please. Roll call.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Yes, present. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have the mayor's commendations, proclamations, and announcements. Right now, we will have two proclamations. The National Public Safety Dispatchers Week will be first, and then the National Volunteer Week. So if the dispatchers would like to step forward. Hi. So this is for the National Public Safety Dispatchers Week, April 10th to April 16th, 2022. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. And whereas an emergency occurs, the prompt response of the police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our police officers and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the City of Auburn's Emergency Communications Center. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety dispatchers of the Auburn Police Department have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas in 2021, public safety dispatchers of the Auburn Police Department handled and processed approximately 32,370 total calls, of which 4,246 were 911 emergency calls. And whereas public safety dispatchers of the Auburn Police Department assist in the processing of reports, additional administrative tasks, and participate in the department's social media presence. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during their performance of their job in the past year. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Sandy Amara, on behalf of the City Council of Auburn, declare the week of April 10th through the 16th, 2022 to be National Public Safety Dispatchers Week in the City of Auburn in honor of men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and citizens safe. Issued this day, 11th day, April 2022. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. So this is for the National Volunteer Week. April 17th to April 23rd, 2022. Hi. And I think I was remiss. I'd like, what's the name of the individual that stood up? What is your name?
Josephine Hodges.
Josephine Hodges. Thank you. I should have introduced you. And before I start, I would like, would you introduce everybody?
So sometimes you don't do, you just delegate. Yeah, we have new volunteers. Just what we are at almost 30 volunteers now, 20 volunteers. So I'll introduce Paul Kessler. Paul Kessler is one of our volunteers, but he is really is our volunteer coordinator. He has done a lot of work, really beating the pavement to get people here to join our team as volunteers. He's come up with a lot of unique ideas. I know one of the things he's working on is a traffic enforcement component to our volunteer program. But I look at Lieutenant Morrison, he's been a huge advocate and huge resource in just getting the volunteers through our background process and everything else. So I can stand here and tell you, as a chief, the team that we have here assembled as our volunteer program, I mean, they are truly an asset to our organization. And I'm proud to have all of them. And I'm certainly proud of the work Lieutenant Morrison has done, as well as Paul Kessler has done. But I'm going to have Paul come up here and then he can introduce everybody.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, now you put on spot.
So we're going to start down there. Evan's one of our newer, matter of fact, everybody here is almost new for the last year, except for Elizabeth or Buffy. This is Buffy. She's been around longer than I have. I've been maybe a year and a half now, 2 years or something like that. So we got Scott. Jan just came on yet last week. And we're excited about that. And then we have Buffy, Susan, Evan, and we probably had 3 or 4 more over at the Fred, as you guys probably know, does all the live scans. So Fred's one of our, he was here, but he couldn't make it at this time frame. So that's pretty much it. Cool. You bet.
So whereas National Volunteer Week has been celebrated since 1974, and whereas our volunteers make a lasting difference as they selflessly dedicate their time and energy to performing acts of goodwill and improving the quality of life for all people. And whereas our volunteers represent all facets and shared values of the city of Auburn and the Auburn Police Department. And whereas in 2021, our volunteers were impacted by the pandemic like everyone. However, through care and compassion, they continue to play an important role in the ongoing success of Auburn. There are not enough thank yous to express our gratitude. And whereas our volunteers play a critical role in the life and well-being of our residents and community. And whereas the national observance of National Volunteer Week sets aside an entire week dedicated to serving others in need and honor those who volunteer all year. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Sandy Amar, on behalf of the Auburn City Council, declare the week of April 17th through the 23rd, 2022 to be National Volunteer Week in the city of Auburn in honor of the men and women who selflessly dedicate their time and energy to improve the quality of life for those who live, work, and play in our community. Issued the 11th day of April, 2022. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Tell him I said hi.
I will.
And again, thank you for volunteers and dispatchers. Now we have the agenda approval. This is a time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of the agenda item. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Anyone have a motion?
Move approval of the agenda as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any item removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. And I'll have our city manager give a brief overview. Again, the council reads this thoroughly and goes over it and asks questions previous But I'd like the public to hear further about these items.
Mayor and Council, real quick, item number 1 is readoption of our Assembly Bill 361 resolution that allows for the conduct of the meetings in a hybrid manner, both online and in person. Item number 2 are the warrants that have been paid by the city for the months of February and March. Item number 3 is our treasurer and investment report. Item number 4 is consideration and adoption of a procurement policy in compliance with SB 1383. That is the organics waste ordinance, which is actually revolutionizing our waste stream. Item number 5 is the submittal of the city's Federal Transit Administration funding. This is the money that goes towards our public transit here in Auburn. Item 6 is legislation that is actually being authored by 2 of our local Congress people, Congressman McClintock and LaMalfa. This is a fire suppression bill, which helps provide some definition for fire suppression in our wildland areas and new policy. Item number 7 is an administrative policy. Actually, this was requested by the City Council about 2 months ago. This is an overall policy which simply put puts the overall purchasing of our committees and commissions in line with the way that it's basically done throughout the city. Items that the council has reviewed in the adoption of the city budget can simply be paid for through the blue claims process. The difference with the committees and commissions, typically a lot of these expenditures have come back to the city council. There are some items that will continue to do that, and those are discretionary payments or expenditures which the council hasn't seen. And one of the best examples might be the Economic Development Commission that does a grant program, and those items would come back. And finally, item number 8 is a contract for the overall maintenance of our AWAS system at Auburn Airport. The AWAS system is an overall monitoring system that's out there, and it looks at things like weather and wind speed, and it's a basic reporting function that is beneficial to both pilots and also the local area-wide air traffic control. And that is the consent calendar.
Thank you very much. Do I have anyone who would like to pull an item?
Madam Mayor,
Councilman Berlant?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, item number 7.
Item number 7 will be pulled.
I wanted to pull item number 4 and I wanted to pull item 7.
Okay.
I'm also on number 4.
Okay. Councilman Spokely. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so item 4 and 7 will be pulled.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second.
I'll roll call. Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Amar.
Item number 4, consideration and adoption of the procurement policy SB 1383. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo.
Yes, thank you very much. I have had extensive discussions with our city manager about this, but I wanted to talk about them today too. I had some questions and I know he was going to try to get some answers for us on this. In particular, and I apologize, I forgot my glasses, so I'm trying to read this like this. If you see me, that's okay. One of the issues that I had is that we're required to procure a specific quantity of recovered organic waste products. And it's based on a formula. The target is calculated by multiplying the per capita procurement target of 0.08 tons per resident and times the number of residents in the city as determined by the California Department of Finance. So the question that I had for our city manager was, do we have that number yet? And if not, when will we get it? And will we get it annually?
So our estimation is the DOF's probably going to come out with the population number on an annual basis. We did, actually, the city attorney and I went and calculated, and our number is about 1,200 tons.
1,200 tons. So that's, okay.
That's a lot of compost.
Wow.
So if it's gold,
Okay.
we're rich.
And the other question is that we're required to procure it. So I'm assuming that means we're required to purchase it because otherwise we would obtain it or something else. And so I'm not sure who's going to set that fee. I know this is the procurement policy, but I'm wondering if that's been something that's been discussed, or we have to procure 1,200 tons at a cost, or do we know that?
So yes, it probably will be at some cost, and we don't really know how that's going to shake out. Cal Recycle is still coming up with exactly how this process will work. You know, there's the other ways to meet the procurement target, things like renewable gas and electricity that we talked about briefly the last time the policy was up here. It's not really clear how you would meet a 0.08 per resident ton requirement through renewable electricity, perhaps by reduction of emissions in some way. So there's still some details from Cal Recycle. They are going to release data that says, here's how much you need to procure. That data's not out yet.
Cal Recycle is going to do that. So they're going to tell us we don't, because we have this target, and then finance is supposed to tell us what our numbers are really our population, which we know too, but in any event, then Cal Recycle will set that.
Correct.
Okay.
We're expecting another set of data from Cal Recycle that gives each jurisdiction exactly what it needs to do and to fill in some of the gaps here, specifically how you can reach that goal with the other 3 methods that are identified in the regulations and this policy for meeting that goal.
And to that effect, I'm really hoping that somehow we can get credit. We now have green energy here. Part of the Pioneer portfolio includes biomass. And, I know that there's a language in here allowing for biomass substitution, but I'm assuming that they're really meaning direct purchase, which is the city of Auburn is not going to do a direct purchase of biomass power. But, I really am hopeful that we'll be able to somehow use that green energy as some kind of leverage here and allow us to, to reduce the number of tons that we have to purchase. I mean, again, it talks about if you purchase the power through, but we're not doing direct purchase, but our power provider is Pioneer and they're purchasing. So, I don't know if there's an opportunity to have dialogue with Cal Recycle when they're doing this or answer those kinds of questions, but I really would like to be able to take the advantage of that, to leverage that. It was one of the reasons I really supported the renewable energy, not only for the environmental benefits, but to allow us to use it to leverage on other requirements. I don't know if you had any response.
Yeah, I would add that the regulations and also this policy allow procurement by quote unquote direct service providers to count. And so it's possible that could be counted towards the city's procurement target.
So how will we find out if we can count that? You said we're going to get additional data from Cal Recycle. I mean, are they promulgating regulations? Do you know, or? I'm putting you on the spot, but.
No, it's all right. The regulations already say that Cal Recycle will publish the data. So that's already in law that they will do it. They will when it's available. I think under these facts, we would get the details of that agreement and then go to the local Cal Recycle rep. There's field reps for each region, as you know. And so I think go to them and say, here's what we're thinking. Here's the specifics. Can this count? And what could we do if not? And get the
Okay,
details
yeah,
out.
I really want to be able to leverage that to the best of our ability. The other issue here, and we're talking about procurement, is, how often are we going to procure the material? Is it going to be once a month, once a year, twice a year? John and I kind of talked about this, not only, how often we're going to procure it, but where we're going to store it. And we're probably not going to be able to sell it because we cannot confirm or validate the quality of the material, regardless of what anyone says. You can't, it's not controlled. So we're probably going to have to give it away. So that means people have to have access to it. So I just kind of wanted to talk about where we're going to store this. We're going to have to build some kind of shed. But, again, in the confines of procurement, we're procuring it, where we're going to put it, how often, that kind of.
Yeah, so the answer to that is it would have to be ongoing. Obviously, as they go through, they process it. The good news is that the green waste is coming out of there literally constantly. So it would be throughout the entire year. So any type of storage that we would have to do would be done simply on probably a reduced basis and on an ongoing basis.
So like a monthly basis, we think we'll have to go out there. Right now, if we're taking our sledge, take the sledge truck out and bring a load of
Compost back.
back. Is that what's
get it
gonna
mixed up.
happen? I mean,
Could be.
but have you given any thought to where we're gonna put it, this procured? So we have to,
Yeah.
no. No, but and John and I kind of talked about, maybe if there's room at the corp yard or this wastewater treatment plant, but these are all details that we have to work out, the nitty gritty details, when we talk about procurement. Let me see if there was anything else that yeah, I think those are really the big questions. So 1,200 tons, Cal Recycle is going to tell us how much we're going to have to pay. It's Cal Recycle that tells us what the cost. No, it's the MRF that's going to tell us the cost.
Yeah,
Correct?
it would probably be the MRF. And
Okay.
in this case, if they charged us the same amount coming out as does going in, the new rate is $68 a ton. So it would come out to about $82,000 a year if we had to pay the same costs going in or out. But if they charge us a processing fee but they don't have to market it now. So we'll see.
Wow.
one thing-
So $82,000 potentially, $82,000 a year. We have to purchase the same compost that we're throwing out. And then, not only do we have to pay to get rid of it, then we have to pay to bring it back. And then we have to get rid of it somehow. And the other part of this is just what happens if we can't get rid of it? I mean, again, I doubt highly that anyone is going to pay for this material because you can't validate the quality and you can't ensure that it doesn't have some hazardous waste in it, paint or anything like that. But, so we have to think about that too. Where are we going to keep it if we can't get rid of it? We kind of talked about maybe putting it back in the bins and
So yeah, just one thing I'd add on the procurement and the transportation side of this, the city has started the process of renegotiating, at least in concept, the franchise agreement with
Yes.
Ecology. There's a possibility there for transporting it and also procuring and having that as part of the services that are provided.
And
That would
yeah.
be baked into the rates and the overall cost the
Yes.
city would pay through the franchise agreement. But that certainly could be something that the city considers including in there and rather than separately negotiating this in a different contract.
I think that would be wise to do that, but also we should talk about whether or not they might be willing to store it for us because the transfer station no longer you no longer store trash. So that might be an opportunity because they do have that area that's covered where the garbage used to be, temporarily before they took it down. Now they go straight down. So I'd like to be able to enter into that discussion with them because that is public space. There's a cover on it. It would be a great place to store the material and they can hold a lot. So if you can maybe put that in your notes for, potential negotiation when we're dealing with that franchise, maybe that's where we're going to put it. All right. Thank you very much. So those were my questions.
Councilwoman Riddell Harris?
I just wanted to make sure that either it's in or that we are pushing for there to be a clause that if we can divert the organic waste first, rather than, if we could divert a significant portion of that waste before we truck it down and waste all the carbon of trucking it down and trucking it back up here, that seems like a win environmentally. And so I want to make sure that that's something that we're allowed to do if we wanted to keep the organic waste here versus paying all the money to drive it down and having all the carbon to drive it down and then drive it back. And if that's not included, we need to be pushing really hard for it. And we need to talk to the other cities to push hard for it too, because that doesn't make any logical sense.
None of this does.
I know, but I'm saying that particular
Yeah.
piece is
I mean-
extra
So this,
bizarre if it doesn't count.
yeah, so this was part of the comments and the Administrative Procedures Act process when Cal Recycle was creating the 125 pages of regulations that went into this. Composting is still allowed. Everyone can do that on their own at their residence. There can also be community composting facilities, and there's
Does
a
that
process in there.
decrease from the
And it-
amount that we have to take?
And it does not.
So that's where we need to work with our fellow groups to
Yeah.
make sure that that piece is included. Because composting, I mean, if we as a city decide to divert it and you make our own compost, so we don't have to waste that carbon, we need to get credit for that.
Yeah, the idea is, not that this is any solace, but the idea was that to equalize the lower producing and overproducing communities and to spread out what is being produced and essentially to force the creation of a market for this product that's being created.
But if we are doing the right thing as a community, we shouldn't be penalized for that. So we need to, I understand that that's how the rules were established.
Yeah.
I also understand that we can push as a community and as a group of communities to make it make more sense and actually do good things for the environment versus more harm. And so I think that we as a community should be pushing for that piece.
And there probably will be revisions to the regulations, I would imagine, in the next couple of years as this actually gets implemented.
There
The
will
other-
probably be, just so to that end, we talked about this a little bit at our League of Cities, Sacramento Valley Division at our last meeting. We had actually had Cal Recycle come and they talked about this. And I very much expect that there will be some changes to the law, actually, as we move forward. We did have one of our assemblymen, not our local area, but from the Sacramento Valley, that was there and didn't really, he talked about this and he was not aware of the significance of the impacts that this legislation put on cities and counties. Somehow in committee, it went through quick or whatever. So some of the legislators are waking up to this, so I do expect some changes.
Okay.
Legislatively.
My
Great.
question is the company that gave us the presentation on creating biochar?
Oh, I was
With-
going to mention that next.
Okay, I beat you to it. Well, you can add to it. Would that be helpful in this process? Would that help with meeting our capacity in terms of what we have to do?
So clearly in the rollout of this whole thing, they're still looking at precisely what you're talking about is diversion credits. Originally, when they came up with the whole source reduction elements that everybody had to do, eventually as overall waste going to the landfill begins to decrease, there are opportunities for diversion and things like biomass facilities and clean power and all of those, they all come into the mix. So they clearly are not in place right now, but they're only getting started.
Something we should definitely look at. Did you want to add?
I was going to say, it would be good to get an update on where that is in the process. I know that the value of LCFS credits is going down, which is where they were originally planning on putting their power into. So maybe there's possibility the city could purchase that biomass power and that could count towards some of our diversion amount, which would be great. In addition to if we could have our own program and negotiate with Recology to take that over there versus all the way down to the MRF and bring it back, then we could divert that and we could turn it into a useful byproduct that then creates that power that we can also take credit for. So that it just seems like there's a lot of synergies with that project and the things that are trying to be accomplished as a state. And then on top of it, we could reduce all of our sludge costs of trucking down and back, which would be huge as well. So it would be nice to know where that is and try to move that piece along because it seems like it works with cost reductions for a lot of the things we're worried about.
I think that's a great idea. Maybe we could have an update in the near future on that. Collectron, I think that was the name of the company.
Yeah.
And with that, if there's no other questions or comments, do we have a motion?
Do we have any public comment?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Is there any public comment? Oh, yeah, Jackie, I see she's ready to say something important.
She's
Let's
riveted.
talk about compost.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that we adopt procurement policy as required by SB 1383.
I'll second.
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Ramar.
Yes, thank you. Item number 7, administrative policy regarding annual budgets for committees, commissions, and appropriations for community support. Councilman Berlant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First off, thank you, Nathan, for the policy. I don't have any specific issues or concerns or questions about the policy itself. what I'm more curious about is how the policy fits in with the broader questions that were requested by the Arts Commission back in January. They had a number of other items related to expenditures that cross or even types of expenditures that cross committee and commission lines. And so I just want to circle back and not lose those other items that they're still looking for direction on. And so I was hoping you could answer the question of what's the broader plan to continue to build out the policy set for the commissions and committees related to expenditures. And I can dive into what they provided back in January, but I would assume you have those as well.
Yeah, so we've had some, and thank you very much, Councilmember Berlant. For the record, Nathan Bagwell, I serve as your Administrative Services Director. And this was the conversation that April and I were having online, as well as when we had the opportunity to come join the Arts Commission. Some of the things that we covered were, and I might be keeping this at too basic of a level. Some of the questions that she was asking were things that were already being addressed by our purchasing policy. So we went through item by item and discussed our processes for things over certain amounts when we go out for requests for proposals or qualifications or in the such. So I think we got clarity on those items within this policy. And again, it's a government policy. So I apologize if it's not just, hey, this is what we do and how we do it in simple terms, but what we were really aiming to do and what I think I connected with April on, and I'm happy to have further conversations with anyone that wants further clarification, is that as things come through, we have now a review process, a formal review process, as the city manager mentioned, the blue claim process. If in that review process, we find something that does cross a line and or that's also an opportunity to engage, go, hey, this is going to be, this is a little different. This might be a gray area. That's where we as staff can then engage, and myself or John, it would simply, okay, this is something that if this was not a pre-authorized expenditure and or this appears to be something that maybe it belongs over here, so that we can support them in that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does answer my question. And I guess I would just provide the feedback that I don't think, and I can only speak for the Auburn Arts Commission, the others may have feedback from the other committees, but I do think that a fact sheet, a couple page document that pulls these other policies. I get it that there's an existing policy on procurement that says when it's over this dollar amount, you need to get multiple bids. If it's over this dollar amount, you can, direct contract, whatever that may be. But I think it would really help, especially because our committees are not staff members, they're volunteers. And so they're not as in tuned to, and neither am I, to be frank, in tune to every single one of the policies and the changing state requirements. And so I guess I would just ask that we kind of circle back and put all of these policies in one place, because it's not just answering April's questions. What about her replacement who wasn't part of the conversation? There needs to be very easy transition so that all of our committees and commissions and those members know the procurement rules, because we are giving them pretty sizable budgets and they're doing great work, but they're just not, and we are not as familiar with all of the policies and procedures and the changes that are constantly happening. So I would request that we follow back up and get a few more items put together and then share to all the committees, because again, it was great having you guys come to the Auburn Arts Commission, but I think one of the major remaining questions are, what if they want to fund something that the Economic Development Committee wants to do, or the Endurance Capital? There's this overlap that can happen amongst these commissions and committees. And so we just need to have a broader discussion about how do we address those overlaps and a procedure or a process.
To that point, the one thing, and we talked with the Art Commission about this, and we'll do the same with the other committees. A lot of the time what people do is that they go fishing to the different committees, trying to get funding on various things. And as we told the Arts Committee on things, stay in your lane. The idea that they are very specific in their budget. It's why, from a staff standpoint, we're working directly with them. We're going to bring a little bit higher definition into the overall budgeting for them to streamline the process. If it's in the budget, they get to go out from most of the committees or commissions will not reach any type of a bidding threshold on anything. But when it comes to the Economic Commission, as an example, if they're going to have a grant process, we've got that. And we've already defined that. But the idea that the commissions are going to be specific about their funding If they have anything discretionary, that's going to loop back to the council on things. And they will have to live within the defined amounts that are in their budget. If they want to move money around, and the best example is the Art Commission this year. They came back, they moved some of their money around, and they brought that back in January to the council as part of their annual report. And we're going to have the committees and commissions giving annual reports moving forward. But to your point, making sure that we work with them on their budget to help streamline and make it easier for them to spend the money. If there are any thresholds, we'll bring that up, and Nathan, maybe we can just do an emphasis of that as part of the overall budget process with them. But as far as getting quotes on everything, everybody needs to follow the endurance capital committee. I've never met a group of people that are tighter with their money on spending it. So we will work with them. But I think this year we're starting by literally going hands-on with them as far as the development of their budgets, defining those things. And I think you'll see that in the upcoming budget.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess I would just ask the council that, assuming we approve this tonight, that we provide direction to put together a 1, 2, 3 page or a summary document that lines out at least the 4 items that the Arts Commission had kind of asked for as a best practices document that you can share with all those committees and commissions. I think, as you noted, and I just would note for the rest of the group, some of this stuff is in the Auburn Arts Commission, or the Auburn Arts Commission's
Handbook.
not just handbook,
It's
but the
their
ordinance that.
Policies.
Oh, yeah,
that
they're
created it,
establishing
that-
the ordinance.
Yeah, the ordinance that created the commission. And
Yeah.
so there may need to be a little bit of review by staff and those committees to make sure that they're not bringing every little thing. And I may be mistaken, and April's not here tonight, but if I'm not mistaken, every purchase by the Auburn Arts Commission is required to come to council. This is kind of saying, well, no, it can be a little bit broader, which is great flexibility, but we may need to update their ordinance, and there may be others that need to be updated. So then I would ask that we add that direction. Everything you said was great, but let's put in a document that we can share and update as appropriate. So thank you.
And I want to add to that. I agree. We do need to do that. There has to be a fact sheet that we can pass to all the committees so that everybody's treated the same. I know sustainability, for instance, is a new committee, and they don't know the process at all. They were coming to me and saying, we want to take a right turn here, but it's in the budget. Can we do that? So we really do need a fact sheet, 2 to 3 pages, going over their 4 items, because things do come up. If there's sometimes they have to change, within their budget, how they want to spend the money. And to come back to us seems like a monumental waste of time. There's got to be a process, and maybe you can work with April or the committees to come up with a process.
Just really simple. We'll come up with an instruction form.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. And anyone else?
I was
Yeah,
just gonna-
yeah, say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if it is a change of something minor, like they want to use it, they were gonna use it on this, now they're using on that. If it can be on consent versus it needing to be a whole, item, that would be great. And the other thing too is, I feel like I still don't understand where the levels for a competitive bid are for the city. So I feel like as a staff member, that's an important thing to know in addition to the committee. So if there's like a 1-pager that says, these are all the different levels, and make it that easy versus it being in a procedure document down deep in some administrative thing, that would be helpful.
Then finally, there's one other thing, the Brown Act.
I was going to
The
talk about that.
committees need to be, have an understanding of what it is, at least some basic understanding. So that might be a part of what the process they have to go through.
And one of the things that has been hampered by COVID is that city clerk, city attorney, and I have all talked about the idea of bringing everybody in for some committee and commission training.
Yeah.
We can cover the purchasing side on everything, but we really do need to have one of those evenings where we get everybody and the city attorney gets up to wag his finger at everybody on all the procedural things, and the rest of us get to be nice. But look for that probably sometime either late in the summer or going into the fall. But we will have that with everybody who's on a committee or commission.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yes, I had wanted to pull this item also. So I wanted to also talk about the Brown Act too. It's not just these procedures, but and John and I have talked about this too, is really bringing all of the committees and commissions up to speed on serial meetings with the Brown Act, just all of that, if whether or not FPPC Form 700s are required of them, even rules, procedure rules and so forth for how to conduct a meeting and things of that nature, and public comment and stuff like that would be helpful. On this particular policy, I did have a suggested change. John and I spoke about this. We talk about expenditure requests are to be submitted to the city manager and or the administrative services in advance for approval to maintain consistency with annual appropriations. And I wanted just to add that 2 weeks, that they are to be submitted 2 weeks in advance, so that the committees and commissions understand that they have, that either admin services or the city manager will have up to 2 weeks to approve those expenditures. That way, we as a council don't hear, well, it took them a week and a half, or why is it taking, it's 2 weeks, it's clear, and we don't have to have any second guessing. So
No,
I
great
would
suggestion.
like to make that change.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Great. I have a motion?
Is there a public comment, Madam?
Any public comment? Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I'll move by resolution that we approve the administrative policy regarding annual budgets for committees and commissions and appropriations for community support as amended.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Riddell Harris. Aye. And Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. That passes. Public comment. This is the time provided so that the public may speak to the council on any item not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on any items not included on this agenda. However, the items will be automatically referred to staff. Council members also have an option to speak on any item not on this agenda at this time. Go ahead. Want to step forward? State your name and address, please.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Prabhakar. I am from Roseville City. So I will start formally. Honorable Mayor and City Council members of Auburn, thank you very much for giving this opportunity. I am Prabhakar, a proud resident of Roseville and volunteer of Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, HSS. We are proud of the city Auburn, the best example of the vibrant inclusiveness of the diverse background and cultures. Back in February, a politically motivated Hindu-phobic individual made hateful and extremely inflammatory allegations on HSS and on Hindu community at large. The words used in relation to HSS are baseless and venomous allegations. This person is going in every city council and spreading the hate against HSS and disturbing harmony among Hindu communities. There is no surprise. He will come back again with some new lies and baseless facts. As we all know, HSS is US-based 501c3 voluntary, non-profit, social, educational, and cultural organization. HSS USA works only in USA, and we don't have any work outside USA. In HSS, we learn about giving back to the community, loving and respecting each other, irrespective of their faith. HSS brings great Hindu pluralistic views and values in making us not only good citizens, but also humans, good humans. I appeal to all the city council members to reflect upon your personal interactions with the Hindu community and HSS and evaluate our actions based on your experience. We would love to have you all in our upcoming events, celebrations, so that you can personally experience our culture. We appreciate the City Council patience and willingness to listen to our community concerns in today's meeting. As always, the Hindu community looking forward to help make our city inclusive, welcoming, and peaceful place for all citizens. Feel free to reach out to us for any time for any clarifications. Thank you and God bless America. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I'm Isan Katir, and I drove all the way up from Davis because some friends told me about this fellow that came and spoke to you in February, I guess, Peter Frederick. And we know Peter Frederick in Davis. I'm I served as a finance commissioner in the city of Davis and on the board of the International House there. So I'm involved a bit in civic affairs. Peter Frederick goes around the country spewing hate speech against the 3.2 million Hindus in America and the 300,000 in California and many thousands in Sacramento. I'm not sure how many in Auburn. But we know him because about 5 years ago, the government of India gave the city of Davis a life-size bronze statue of Mahatma Gandhi. And we installed it in the Central Park. And it's a wonderful reminder that we might want to solve things through peaceful means. But this Peter Frederick came and spoke and stood in front of the statue on several occasions and called for the removal of the statue. So coincidentally, a few months after he spoke, in the middle of the night, some vandals came and sawed it down with a metal saw and then beheaded him here in our public park in Davis. So I don't know the exact link between Mr. Frederick and this group who did that, but the FBI is investigating it as the two agents that I talked to said it should be a domestic terrorism because the penalties are more severe than hate crimes. So they're still working on that. The police department in the city of Delhi, India, has Mr. Frederick on their watch list whenever he might set foot in Delhi. He's not a welcome person. So just to kind of give you his background so that you can be aware of what he's up to. What else? My ancestors fled and came to America escaping religious persecution back in 1620. So I'm surprised to see religious persecution still going on in the form of Mr. Frederick. And I know we are all wanting inclusiveness and diversity. And so I hope that will prevail in this case as well. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? How about city council?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, actually, I guess it would be, I think it'd be great to have a presentation. I know that Eric Chun from the Joss House is planning great things there. They're looking to have a grand opening, a grand reopening, so to speak, on May 21st. So I'd like to invite him just to come and give a little presentation, 5-minute presentation to the council on what's happening there and what the city might be able to do.
And I would agree with that. I think that's something we should do and hear about. They're working very hard. There's a work night tomorrow night, I believe.
Yes, they'll be
Anybody's
working, yeah.
interested.
So it's really, it's not work on staff. It would just be inviting him to a council meeting so that he can give a brief presentation on what's going on there. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. That ends public comment. Now to council business, the military equipment use policy, AB 481. Chief Canan.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. Again, Ryan Canan, your Chief of Police. So Assembly Bill 481, the military use policy, was intended to increase the transparency, accountability, and oversight surrounding the acquisition and use of military equipment by state and local law enforcement, including but not limited to armored or weaponized vehicles, large caliber firearms, explosive projectile launchers, explosive breaching tools, or flashbang grenades. So today, per the legislation, requires law enforcement agencies to obtain approval of the applicable governing body, which is City Council, before requesting funding and acquiring, using, or collaborating in the use of military equipment as defined in the Government Code Section 770. Furthermore, the bill also requires similar approval for the continued use of military equipment acquired prior to January 1 of this year. I would like to point out, though, that the Assembly Bill uses the terminology military equipment to identify really 15 individual categories. It's not actual equipment used only by the military or military equipment we get from them, but it's these 15 areas to include unmanned aerial systems, our patrol rifles, various less lethal platforms, and less lethal munitions, in addition to the tracked vehicles they talk about, or even weaponized drones. And a lot of our, like I said, point out there, the less lethal munitions, gas. Although the law and many people refer to, in quote, flash bang grenades, the actual terminology is noise flash diversionary devices. I will say, it just doesn't sound as cool. I'm here. One of the things part of AB 481 is that it requires an annual report to City Council and to the community as well, which provides at minimum those 6 categories: how the equipment was used, was there a complaint as a result of it, internal audits or violations that the policy that we found, annual cost, what it looks like for all those different categories there: acquisition, personnel training, the transportation maintenance, and then we'll do this in the form of that based on that calendar year, the quantity possessed for each type of military equipment, and if we plan on acquiring any additional, and what that cost would be. Along these lines too, as we go through this process, the law enforcement has already been able to access military equipment through the federal government. Oftentimes you'll hear things referred to as a 1033 program, or ultimately the 1033 program. What that does is allows us to access some of the equipment that is no longer being used by the military. Down the hill, agencies have what they call a MRAP, which is the mine resistant ambush protected vehicle. That vehicle itself has cost, a similar vehicle would cost upwards to $250,000 to $500,000, but that city gets that vehicle for free. All they have to do is do the maintenance, and now they have a actual rescue vehicle that there was very minimal cost to that city. So these are tools and resources that this program provides. Now this program, AB 41, provides the oversight that both the federal government was going down the route of, but as well as this was the state's answer to making sure that we as law enforcement are accountable to our community for the equipment that we use. So as we go through this approval process, you'll see there that we have to take it in front of council. And really today's meeting is for you to have reviewed the policy as you see there, and to ask any questions, because we will come back with an amended policy and an ordinance that will be approved by this governing body, the City Council, into the second reading. And the second reading would be our really the opportunity for the public to come in and hear the policy as well. It also has to be on our website 30 days prior to that second hearing. And then again, the council in an open session at a regular meeting and provide for public comment, as I mentioned before. The determination shall only approve a military equipment use policy pursuant to those 4 areas. If you can determine all the following: military equipment is necessary because there is no reasonable alternative that can achieve the same objective of the officer and civilian safety. B is proposed military equipment use policy will safeguard the public's welfare and safety and civil rights and civil liberties. If purchasing the equipment is reasonably cost effective compared to available alternatives that can achieve the same objective of officer and civilian safety, and prior military equipment use complied with the military equipment use policy that was in effect at the time, or if prior uses do not comply with the accompanying military equipment use policy, corrective action has been taken to remedy non-conforming uses and ensure future compliance. So we went through the Lexipol policy draft that was attached to the staff report, and we itemized each one of the pieces of equipment that we have. As you note in the staff report, in the policy, there's a number of areas that we do not have, such as the tracked vehicles, the weaponized aircraft. We do not have a taser, shockwave, or microwave weapons. nor do we have water cannons or what is referred to as an LRAD or a long-range acoustic device. We do not have a Humvee, nor do we have the mine-resistant ambush protected vehicle. So today, staff recommends that City Council review the proposed policy for military equipment use and provide direction to staff related to the department's proposed process as well as the policy.
City Council, Councilman Berlant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Chief. I don't have anything specific on the policy itself, but I was curious just at the timing, since we're talking about military equipment, if there's been any requests from Cal OES or the state to bring back any of that military equipment to send to Ukraine. The state has been sending a lot of equipment over to Ukraine, to assist with the war. And I was just curious if that request reaches back down to this equipment at all, or once it becomes ours, is it ours?
That's a great question. Typically, once it still belongs to the federal government, obviously, but in this case, I don't believe they've requested anything back from any of these other agencies. That's not something that I've heard as of yet.
Thank you. That was all I had on this. So thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that you brought this before us. One thing I would like you to do in the policy, I appreciate the amount of detail, but what I would like you to include in the policy is whether or not there is a reasonable alternative to achieve the same objective. In here, you state that the city council shall only approve the military equipment use policy pursuant to the bill if it determines the following. And one is that it's necessary because there's no reasonable alternative. As a council member, I myself would rely on your expertise for that because I can't determine whether or not there is something that's reasonable and some alternative. So for each of these items, because you do address the fiscal piece, you address the public safety piece, and you address all those pieces. But the only piece I'd like you to include in there is that there is no other reasonable alternative. And just a brief explanation why. This battery RAM is, it has the highest rating and they're, whatever. I'm just, but just so that when we adopt the policy, we're complying with the provisions of the law by saying that. So making that finding.
Absolutely, and we can do that. And that's something you'd like to see specific to each item, or is a broad generic statement?
I think it should be the way I read the legislation, and I think that we have to apply it to each of the categories.
Okay.
So when we talk about, battering rams, slugs, and breaching apparatus, explosives in nature, that we go through and we talk about, we have the Remington 870 breaching shotgun, quantity 1. You have A, B, C, D. You talk about the purpose, authorized use, expected lifespan, fiscal impact, and then I would just say any reasonable alternative. No, or whatever your answer is there, just so that we can
Understood.
make that finding that there is no specific reasonable alternative.
Understood.
Okay, Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Just real quick, the part of it is to do a presentation that's accessible to the community. Reading this, it's a little dense. Is there a presentation that you're planning that's a little bit more user-friendly and easy for the public to understand than this very long document with lots of words in it?
So initially, we were not. We were going to use the city council meeting as a second hearing and the opportunity for the community to come forward and ask questions. If city council determines that they believe that there's a need to do a public outreach, then we will do that.
Maybe because there's still another reading, maybe there could be a PowerPoint included in that that's a little, maybe with some pictures and a little easier for the general public to take in.
Understood. We can do that.
Thank you.
Councilman Berlant.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, Councilwoman Donna Calvillo, on your requested change. Can you walk us through the specific sections that you want to see added? I was trying to figure out where to follow, but then you threw me off by wanting to see your language, which I agree with. I understand on each section versus what I think the chief suggested, which was maybe one blanket statement where that justification is required. But if you're going to ask for change, can you walk us through which section you want to see changed?
Yes, yes, I can walk you through that.
Thank
So I'm
you.
just going to take, and I use the one, I use the battering ram as an example. So in the policy itself, it goes through and it talks about all the military equipment, right? So like 709.3 military equipment coordinator, not that one, sorry. I
believe
don't
you're-
have my glasses, so I
I believe you're
apologize.
referring to policy 709.4.7.
Yes, military equipment inventory.
Mhm.
I didn't bring my reading glasses, so I apologize. So under that section, we go through and we talk about all of the military equipment that we have. And so I would just like to have it included there. It says, for example, under the first one, 709.4.1, unmanned aerial system, UAS equipment. It gives a description of what it is. It says its purpose. It says its authorized use. It says expected lifespan, the fiscal impact, training, legal. And I just wanted to add, EFG would be that there is no reasonable alternative.
Gotcha. So your request is to add a section G for each of those that says
Yes,
investigation or other reasonable alternative.
yes.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for the clarification.
And one clarification, Councilwoman Riddell Harris, for the second reading, a PowerPoint as a part of this presentation would suffice.
Yeah, PowerPoint, just something a little easier for the general public to understand.
I just want to add on process. There will be a first reading and a second reading after this. This is a presentation to start the deadline before May 1, so there will be 2 more hearings for the council.
So maybe do it at the first reading.
So we'll include the PowerPoint as part of that first reading
Great.
and then in the second reading.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Sure. Madam Mayor, I will move that we provided direction. So I guess it's, right? We already-
Before, I just want to make sure there's no public comment. I keep
Yeah, thank you.
forgetting that. Thank you.
I think there, if I'm not mistaken, we only need to give the direction. I think. the
Yeah.
direction
Oh,
is
you're
clear,
right.
Yeah, so.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think we need to take.
we reviewed and we provided direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councilman Berlant.
Interesting stuff. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Brian Morrison, Lieutenant with the Police Department, overseeing patrol and operations. Given the up and coming ongoing crisis as described with fentanyl, we're all aware of, wanted to update the council as well as the city regarding our efforts as a police department, as well as kind of what we're seeing as a whole, global, countywide, citywide, statewide. Fentanyl, no doubt, is making its way locally and spreading north and south of us, east and as far west as the islands and things of that nature. In doing so, wanted to give a brief overview of the police department's efforts, as well as trends that we're seeing and those notable concerns as a whole. So I think it's a fair place to start with giving a brief history of fentanyl. It's an overview, as I said, but it's important in my opinion. Just an understanding what fentanyl is. It's a synthetic opioid that's 80 to 100 times more potent and stronger than the commonly described morphine, which is already being abused as a narcotic once people start experience injuries and finding ways to relieve some of those pains. Morphine itself is being abused. That said, people reach out and they look for something more potent as our body begins to get used to that. They want a stronger drug to relieve some of that pain. Moving on to just some basic timeline of fentanyl. 1960, it was first synthesized by a doctor in Belgium, or a Belgian chemist. And his basic work focused on developing new pain meds. From there, in 1963, fentanyl was introduced across Western European countries, where it was frequently used as an intravenous painkiller, administered generally by doctors and things of that nature. 1968 received its approval from the US FDA, be used in combination with other drugs for fear of its abuse due to its potency. So I find this to be important that as far back as 1968, it was being recognized as being or having the potential to be an issue and abused. And some precautions were being used at that point. 1972, it became available for the use on its own. And by the late 1970s and early 80s, the drug was being widely used in cardiac and vascular surgery. 1990s, pharmaceutical companies began working on the alternative delivery methods. Rather than just going down the road of intravenous, they made it easier for consumption, which is becomes more and more scary and kind of leading to where we are today in terms of how easy it is to obtain, and then at the same time, how easy it is to ingest into the body. Early 2000s, we began to see an increase in fentanyl misuse given the above alternative delivery methods. As I mentioned, we increased the simplicity of getting it into the body. We began to see an increase in abuse. 2005 to 2007, the U.S. DEA identified over 1,000 deaths associated with illegally manufacturing non-pharmaceutical fentanyl. By 2013, the street use of fentanyl began to climb, as fentanyl was often sold as heroin. From there, we began to see heroin being laced with fentanyl and progressing into just straight fentanyl use. 2016, the illicit use of fentanyl became more public with the death of the pop star Prince. Not necessarily what you want to be notarized as, but that death and Prince's death, knowing that he was using fentanyl, kind of brought the epidemic or crisis to an all-time high and highlighted the use of it. Between 2010, 2019, overdose deaths involving heroin more than quadrupled between 2010 and 16. Fentanyl deaths increased 540% across the U.S. Between 2016 and 19. As you, that alone pretty much is pretty obvious just exactly what we're faced with and dealing with. Some of those notable concerns, we already talked about the potency and that it's 80 to 100 times more potent than morphine. Another issue is the manner in which this illicit drug is being manufactured, and I'll get into that a little bit later. The manner in which the communities are obtaining it, you'll be surprised that it's very simple for any member of any one community to obtain it. Shocking. The manner in which the U.S. or that it's making it into the U.S. Would more than likely blow your mind as well. So the manufacturing of fentanyl, much of it is being manufactured in Mexico. And it's evident, and we're seeing proof of that through some of our efforts in terms of our task force teams that the Auburn Police Department is a part of. So it's being produced and advertised, or it's being produced and advertised as fentanyl. That's the obvious way that people are ordering it and getting it, and that it's being produced. But at the same time, and the scary part of this, that it's being advertised and purchased as another drug, but with fentanyl in it. So people aren't obvious or are knowingly getting what they're expecting to get. And then at the same time, it's also being counterfeited. A tablet or a pill is being stamped, indicating that it's one drug, but it's actually something else. More than likely a means of getting something that is more, that's legal into a location, but showing as something else. Move over to what we're mostly seeing in terms of the production of the fentanyl. They're generally being marked as these blue M30 pills, and it's what most people are commonly overdosing on. Back in 2020, a single pill was running somewhere between $10 and $12 a pill. As you move into 2021, that cost was significantly reduced by more than half, or $4 to $5 a pill. And sometimes, depending on where you're at, as low as $2.50 a pill if you're purchasing large quantities. Moving to 2022, the cost per pill is staying pretty steady, and As you can see up there, a kilo is right now is ranging between 15,000 and 18,000 per kilo. How our communities are obtaining fentanyl. This is the scary part, right? The friends are providing other friends with fentanyl. Fentanyl is being ordered online and delivered through the U.S. Postal Service. Some of that is based on the counterfeit, and some of that is just simplicity. It's the M30 pills that they're sending through. And then traditional drug dealers. The rate and method in which fentanyl is entering the U.S. An overwhelming amount of fentanyl is coming through the U.S.-Mexico border. In 2021, an estimated of 8,800 kilos were seized at the border. In 2021, Trident, which is our federal task force team, which we have a member from the Auburn Police Department that serves on that team, they seized roughly almost 750,000 blue M30 fentanyl pills, which equals 195 pounds of fentanyl. The notable and very concerning part about this is that it's capable of overdosing 2 generations of the entire population of Placer County. In 2020, an estimated of almost 2,100 kilos made it in, and those were all seized from our Trident team. Method of transportation, you name it. They're being very creative in how these pills are being transported and crossing the border. They're coming in planes, they're coming in trains, and automobiles, no pun intended to the movie itself. However, we're also seeing it in vessels also. They're overtaking, the U.S. Coast Guard's overtaking vessels that submarines and things of that nature that are delivering to portions of the United States. So our response, obviously one of the more important questions probably on everybody's mind. And we kind of look at this as, I divide it into 3 areas. And we have our patrol officers, we have our task force team, and then we kind of do this through education as well. Our patrol officers are their primary, they're going to be the officers that respond generally to some sort of crisis that's going on immediately, an overdose, things of that nature. They're the primary unit that's going to be administering the naloxone / more commonly known as Narcan. They tend to work collaboratively with the task force teams upon responding to an overdose to gather intelligence on the drug dealer. So what we often see is they'll respond to an overdose. Those patrol officers will then reach out to members of our task force team. And those task force team, what they will try to do based on the simplicity is track down where these dealers are coming from via IP addresses and things of that nature when they're ordering them online. So that's kind of the patrol officer's role. Task force team role, our special investigation unit, they're a countywide task force team comprised of members, Placer County law enforcement agencies. We do have a detective that serves on that team. That's primarily who our patrol officers are in direct contact with, and they do a lot of the behind the scenes investigations when we do experience an overdose. Our Trident team, they're the federal task force team that I spoke of earlier. They're comprised of members from local, state, federal law enforcement officers. They are a team that does a lot of the work that cuts these the drug dealers who are bringing the drugs in from Mexico. They're cutting them off, and you'll see later really taking down pretty significant amounts of pills that are coming in and actually targeted to be delivered in Placer County. And then our criminal investigations unit, they're there to supplement generally the special investigations unit and help out if that detective needs any help as well. The education piece, our SROs are beginning to provide awareness on campus as they make their way in, and it will certainly be a target of theirs as we get our 2 SROs into place by full-time by next fall. At the same time, when we have opportunities to have community outreach, we'll do that. We'll educate the community on experiences that we're seeing with the fentanyl, and then various community events in which we might participate in. I touched on it moments ago regarding the efforts of our narcotics divisions. I told you might be surprised by some of what's coming in, but the pictures that you see here are all takedowns in which Trident has taken place in within the last year. And each and every single one of those pictures and takedowns, the intended delivery location was Placer County, and some being Auburn itself. The first picture on the left, that was a takedown that the shipment was headed toward Placer County, and the team itself found the opportunity to take it down in the Fresno area before it made its way up here. But through informants, there was enough substantial evidence to believe that that was being delivered to Placer County. I believe that was quite a significant amount of methamphetamine, but over 150,000 blue M30 blue tablets. The second picture there is just a closer look at the M30 tablets on the scale. Those were headed to Placer County, and it was part of that takedown just to the left. Your third picture there, that was a takedown that occurred right here in Auburn in February of 2022, so a month and a half or so ago. Those tablets were anticipated to be delivered into the Auburn and county of Auburn, or Placer County in the North Auburn area. And as early as last week, there's the takedown. Occurred in Rockland. However, there is significant belief that it was going to make its way up into Auburn as well. I believe the takedown in February was roughly 100,000 pills, and then the one in Rockland was 130,000 blue tablets. So needless to say, our Trident team is doing a wonderful job in trying to prevent that from, coming across the border, but once they do, trying to keep it from making its way into Placer County and more specifically Auburn. All right, naloxone slash Narcan. Naloxone is sold under the brand name of Narcan, among others. It's a medication used to reverse the effects of opioids. It's commonly used to counter decreased breathing and opioid overdose. Naloxone may also be used combined with an opioid to decrease the risk of misuse through injection. So it's the quick response that we've armed our patrol officers with. The picture up there on the left is exactly what our officers have been trained to use, and it's been deployed in each of our patrol vehicles as a means to counteract those who have suffered an opioid overdose. On the right, that's more of a medical form of the naloxone. Brief little timeline on the naloxone. It was first patented in New York as an antidote to the opioid overdoses. 1961, FDA in 1971 approved naloxone for treating opioid overdoses by intravenous and intramuscular injections. Given the increase, medical professionals began experimenting with new administrative techniques outside of hospitals. I think that was in the 90s, and I think that goes to show that there was a true concern of the fentanyl overdoses and the direction that was going. 1996, 15 states began piloting take-home naloxone kits for laypersons. What we found in recent overdoses, when patrol officers have responded, we've found victims, people who have actually overdosed with these take-home kits laying next to them, and unfortunately, they just couldn't get to them on time by the time that the fentanyl kicked in. According to the CDC, more than 26,000 opioid overdoses were reversed by non-medical personnel between 1996 and 2014. So this is what we've done. We've equipped Auburn officers within the Auburn Police Department with naloxone. In 2018, our staff received training in how to recognize opioid overdoses as well as administering the naloxone. 2018 was the first, is when we first procured and deployed the naloxone in our patrol cars. And the picture there in the middle is just a example of the manner in which our patrol officers carry and deploy the naloxone. It's kept in a medical bag for easy access. It's in the same place in every bag so that we can get to it quickly and increase the speed and efforts and efficiency in which we're able to administer it to a patient who's suffering from an overdose. Kind of some deployments by the number and by the years. 2018, the first year that we deployed the naloxone. We didn't find an opportunity to administer it. 2019, we had 2 opportunities to. 2020, we deployed the naloxone once, and 2021, 5 times. As you can see in that middle box there, those are the number of patients that it revived. So we've had 100% success when we've arrived on scene, determined that somebody was overdosing from fentanyl. They then administered the naloxone, and 100% of the time we were able to revive them and bring them back. And then unfortunately, that last column there shows some numbers as far as those that we've responded to, and a descendant was already, the call was made to the police department that somebody had deceased, and through toxicology reports, those are the number of people that were found to have been the primary death or cause of death was the fentanyl. So in 2020, 2 people were determined to have died as a naloxone as a fentanyl overdose, and 4 in 21. And I just learned that 1 in 2022 so far. With all that, that kind of gives you a brief overview. And if anyone has any questions?
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Councilman Spokely?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Lieutenant Morrison, thank you very much for your presentation. Very sobering statistics. So couple of questions. I mean, the amount of times that you guys have supplied the naloxone?
Naloxone, Narcan's probably the easiest way to refer to it, and
Narcan?
we'll all be on the same page.
So you roll up to somebody that's incapacitated, right, passed out on the ground, and how do you make the determination that it appears to be an opioid overdose?
Yeah, so that was part of the original training that our officers received. And it's a totality of the circumstances in which the officer is on viewing. We're looking at multiple objective symptoms, some very deep breathing, if breathing at all, kind of purplish lips, very constricted pupils, things of that nature. So it's looking at all of them. A lot of the telltale signs are those top 3 that I just named off are prime indicators of more than likely some sort of opioid or fentanyl overdose.
So in 2021, your officers administered 5 doses. Am I reading that right? 5 doses and 5 revivals, or?
Correct. They responded to 5 calls of a potential overdose. They arrived on scene. They determined that the person was suffering from a opioid or fentanyl overdose. Of those 5, once they recognized based on the objective symptoms, they administered the naloxone or Narcan, and those 5 that received the treatment were revived, transported to the hospital, and administered for further treatment.
And you know, a lot of the reading I've done on the synthetic opioids and some of the pervasiveness in which our homeless population is addicted to this stuff has talked a little bit about the dangers and the fact that, you know, you're buying these green, you know, these blue pills. You never know how much is actually in the pill. So it's highly, highly dangerous to even touch the stuff, right? I mean, it's.
Yes. So my best analysis or that you could put to it is almost like baking a cake or baking chocolate chip cookies. The manner in which these M30 pills are being made and produced down in generally Mexico would be very equivalent to making chocolate chip cookies. And you put all the ingredients into this bowl, you mix it up with your KitchenAid, and then you take a scoop of it. Not every cookie is going to come out with 10 pieces of chocolate chips in it, it's going to come out, they're going to come out with 5, some with, 15, some with 10s, that type of range. And when you start kind of with no scientific or exact measurement into each tablet, that's when it becomes dangerous, because you could get some of those pills with little to none, and then you could get some of those pills with obviously a very tragic amount of fentanyl in them. So there's no pill has the same amount of fentanyl in it.
That's a very good analogy or way to describe kind of what's going on here. The articles though that I've read specific to, the synthetic nature and the fact that nobody really knows exactly what it's doing to people's brains that are on this stuff, are in some circles or in some articles I've read, they're citing this as kind of the leading cause of some of the mental illness and homelessness and other issues that are plaguing our country, frankly. How much of, say, those 5 cases that we talked about in your table, how many of those were folks that were homeless in our community?
I would have to go back and double check those numbers. I can't say that it was all homeless or transient related. I do know of several incidents in which we've had where we're responding to homes, we're responding to restaurants.
Okay.
Not so much calls specifically to the street. I can't really focus on one or the other because they have been spread out between different dwellings and establishments.
Okay. I guess the last, maybe it's just a comment. Well, it's a question. What, if anything, do you need from this council to help you and your officers when you guys roll up and find somebody that's overdosed on fentanyl? Do we need more of the injectors? Do we need what if anything can we help you guys obtain so that we can try to save the next guy who overdoses, or gal, or whoever who overdoses on opioids?
Yeah, in terms of the naloxone or Narcan, we do pretty well in terms of we're able to secure an amount that carries us, I believe it's a 3-year expiration. We're able to secure that with no fiscal impact to us. So we're doing pretty well there. It's just the continued support that we get from council and to help, in terms of letting people know that we're here to talk about it. We're here to educate people. We're here to be supportive of those. We'll find resources for those who are suffering from these opioid addictions. Just continue to be the voice, I think, is the biggest thing.
And one last thing, do me a favor and thank our officer or detective who's on the Trident team, because seeing those piles of these drugs and how deadly they are, it's fantastic that they're out there doing what they do. So thank him for me when you see him next.
Absolutely.
Or her.
Better. Councilman Berlant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just echo the comments that were made. You really were able to, I think, show us literally the value of the Trident team. That's long been a discussion over the years, what we get back in Auburn for membership there. And so appreciate that. I just have one clarifying question. On your table up here, the number of times administered, does that equate though to the number of overdoses within our community for those years?
No, it doesn't. So those are what we know to be the number of times that we've gone out and we've been able to bring somebody back who suffered from an overdose. The easiest way to tell that is by, unfortunately, those deceased calls that we went to, where that incorporates after the fact when, the scientific toxology report has been done. So.
Do we capture though if the fire department responds to an overdose and then they transport and maybe they transport before PD even arrives? Would that overdose somehow be captured in these numbers, or are you confident that, I'm just trying to get an idea of, sure, out out of the entire community, is it really 9 or could it actually be even higher because it did not, the overdose did not engage police response, or at the time, there wasn't a police officer before they were transported out of the city?
Yeah, I would venture to guess that it's probably higher for a number of different reasons. One, there are probably times when the fire department does respond, get there before us. We've had a number of occasions when only the fire department was dispatched. And as a result, our dispatchers overheard fire being dispatched, and we had officers that were closer to the scene and incident than what the fire department was, and they were able to administer the naloxone prior to even fire arriving. So some of those unfortunate events where the communication isn't there. I'm sure the fire department has their own stats as we have our own as well. I mentioned that a lot of these, some of these overdoses that we weren't dispatched to until it was too late. Some of those people had naloxone sitting right next to them. So my question then becomes, how many of them have that sitting next to them and have actually had friends administer it, and we never even hear about it? So I would be willing to guess that it's much more, the numbers are significantly greater than what we're actually seeing here. These are just what we know of. I'm sure fire has their own set of stats, and then we have those are just absolutely unreported because we're actually handing out naloxone to people, not the police department, but agencies are. So it's really easy for the addicts to get that. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Lieutenant. I also echo the words, if there's more we can do to help, but it's a crisis, even if this is a fraction of the overall number of overdoses that our community is facing. If there's things we can do, let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilwoman Dowden Cavila.
Yes, thank you very much, Lieutenant. I appreciate this information. I echo the words of my colleagues on this. It's very sobering, and whatever we can do to continue to support you. It's amazing, and it's very tragic, that we've got such an issue. But very grateful for our officers and our firefighters that are able to respond and to save lives. But again, anything that we can do, really do appreciate it. I didn't have any questions. So thank you.
Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I concur with what everyone else has said, but I do want to continue to have you guys out in the schools. I know that getting this information out early so that students understand the impacts of their decisions is important. And drugs it feels like they keep getting younger and younger that starts. And so I think that the biggest way that we can help, aside from, dealing with the consequences of this, is preventing it in the first place. And a lot of that has to go, there's a certain amount of going out to the general community, but I think that having a generation that's well educated about this will help us to keep this from happening in the future. So thank you.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. How long is the response time after, or the window of opportunity to help an individual after they've overdosed?
I'm not certain on those facts. They're a little bit above my expertise in terms of medical, what that medically looks like. I know that we've had responses that have been a couple of minutes long, in which we've been able to get there, apply it, and it's brought the patient back around. We've also been there as quick as 30 seconds. And that's becomes kind of a no-brainer. However, it all depends. It's really hard to put a specific number on that, because it depends on the amount of fentanyl in which was ingested. One of our deployments that we had, quite frankly, it took 2 doses from us and 3 or 4 from fire. We essentially came close to running out, but fire happened to have more on them specifically. So that probably had a lot to do with time, as well as the amount of fentanyl that person had ingested.
Okay, so very, thank you. And have you seen it in the high school or elementary schools?
Personally, I haven't seen it, but we do know, obviously, that I don't believe any has been taken off of the students at the high school level or the middle school level, but we do know that obviously that they are using it. I believe there's a student up in North Auburn that was attended Placer High that obviously had come in contact with it and ingested it, and unfortunately didn't make it. So it's prevalent, it's amongst us, and it's like we talked about, educating in the schools is probably our best opportunity, and that's what we intend on doing.
And going along with that, do you get the individuals who came through it to speak against or with regard to the pros and cons of participating in that type of activity and what we can do, what they can do to help their fellow students?
So I would say if we come across that person in terms of the follow-up investigation that our special investigation units does, but what they're running into is a lack of cooperativeness sometimes. I think that if we come across a student that is grateful and thankful and wants to work with our detectives, that's a phenomenal idea to take them and be a spokesperson to their peers. But it's a matter of running into that person that's willing to and wanting to.
And so, well, sometimes the criminal justice system will help you with that too.
Sure.
But, and then, this is frightening and what you displayed here and told us tonight is sobering and very important for all of our community to know, because as you indicate, and as you can see, it's getting worse and worse. So, I do believe with my councilwoman, Rodell Harris, I concur, we do need to educate, not just the kids, but the community. And it's, I think it is important that we support you, and I'm happy that you're using naloxone. And if you need anything, please come back and especially in with regard to the SRO too. I know that's coming down the pike here, and so hopefully that can help in the situation as well. So, are the public have any questions? No, you don't. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm doing like a bus where you take the whole school and like make them empty their bags. I don't know how legal that is. I think it happened once. It might have happened to me, but I remember it vaguely. Because I feel like I have friends with kids in high school, and the drugs are in the school for sure. And they're in the marijuana, which is scarier to me than the pills because they don't know that's in there. But I don't know if that's something that's possible or it's, I don't know. It's a thought that I had while sitting at the school park reserve last week, watching them do lines off their books. But I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. So there are obviously some laws that we have to follow and go by, and some various things that we're looking at and considering is bringing back a canine program. What does that look like? Does that look like an apprehension dog? Does that look like a drug detecting dog, which would then help us in terms of sniffing out these things, which would then lead and allow us to do more thorough searches regarding the possibility of those drugs being on the possession or on the persons of students or in their bags.
Yeah, I just like earlier you can catch them and
Sure.
get them in trouble. I mean, all these guys are now okay. Obviously.
Sir.
I would love to know the age and the gender of these people. Also, am I hearing you correctly that your department doesn't talk to that department about how many of these shots you're giving? Is that correct?
So the fire department, they run their own computer-aided dispatch system, which doesn't necessarily talk to ours. So in terms of knowing exactly how many the fire department have responded to and revived, I don't know those exact numbers now.
Okay, but it would seem to me the council would want to know that information, right? You're both serving the same community. On this regard, it would seem beneficial that we would know what you're doing out there. The other thing I'd like to know is, do we know at Sutter Emergency Room, how many cases do they see? What I fail to see here is the impact on the total community. If we have 12,000 people, I feel very bad for the 5 that are, I guess, lucky that you were there, and very bad for the 4, but 9 people out of 12,000. Is that the true impact of this problem on the community?
Well, I would be willing to bet that the numbers are greater, and in terms of doing what we can to reach out and collaborate and gather those numbers, that's something that we could work on and bring to a
That's all I'm saying. Is I would, I mean, I'm a former marketing guy, and I would want to know numbers. How big is this market?
Sure.
How many assets do I throw at that population?
Well, I think, yeah, I think also he said there's a private sector too, and that's hard to track
Well,
as well.
Thank you. That's probably an excellent response to that, but it just seems to me, you know, you're not presenting all the data that we know, particularly if you guys aren't talking to each
well, we can
other. I'm
certainly.
not criticizing you, I'm just pointing that out. It just struck me as odd.
Sure, we can certainly run the numbers and gather those. I might venture to guess that if you start looking at hospitals, we might be somewhat restricted in getting those numbers based on HIPAA and things of that nature. But it's obviously worth, reaching out and trying. I don't know how much they would actually release in terms of, regarding the HIPAA violations and laws.
And again, I have to echo this, for the 5 that survived, excellent job. Thank you.
I'm fairly sure that the chiefs could tell us how they talk to each other on a regular basis about all this. This is, I think, just coming from the police's point of view, but I'm sure that they discuss this information and make sure that they are on the same page about administering all this and trainings and all of those things, because this is a critical issue to our entire community, and police and fire normally work very well together about those things.
Thank you very much for your report. We're going to take, there's no action required, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. And before we do our last presentation, Chief Kanan.
Get one of the dogs like they have down in Mexico. They are not sleeping dogs. Yeah. Oh, no, they don't look like a police dog. I was just that person. Hold on, that's it. I know. Get on the back of that car. The most of that's. Yeah. So the those guys were in county for 3 months. They were just gather information. So. At the time, our structure, whenever you see those numbers.
You mean this? I think like.
Thank you. We'll have item number 12, the 2021 Police Department Annual Report Presentation. Chief Canam.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. Ryan Canan, your Chief of Police for the third time tonight. This was
Three
all
times
PD,
tonight.
all times. On the heels of the presentation, I want to, give kudos to Lieutenant Morrison for the presentation, for putting it together, really kind of painting that pretty elaborate picture of what's been going on. And the thing is, you look at what he just showed pictures of. The fact is that this fentanyl is making its way through the country. It's been making its way for years, state of California, through Placer County, and that's a big part of that. It is a real threat to not only, the community, but the youth. And a lot of those questions are, focused on youth. And yes, the youth have died as a result of fentanyl. It's a unique aspect of it where, certainly as a father of four and as a police chief, we don't condone drug use at all. We don't condone any of that. Kids having access to it. And actually, it was a conversation we had with the Chiefs Advisory Council not too long ago about fentanyl and drug use in the schools. And, I know Lieutenant Morrison was identifying some stats and what have you. I don't think we'll ever truly know the number of fentanyl related overdoses that are out there. Parents are literally sending their kids to parties with Narcan, you know, and to his point, it's like sometimes those folks couldn't use Narcan to revive themselves, but friends are using it to revive their friends, and parents are sending their kids because, again, I'll tell you, I mean, it's one of those things in my own mind. I can't necessarily comprehend it, but I get from a community, I get from some of these parents who are saying, hey, I get my kid, you know, not that I condone it as a parent, but they're going to access some type of a pill, and the kids don't necessarily know what they're buying. Not saying it's right, but the fact is they don't even know what they're getting, and they're overdosing on a pill that they thought might have been an Adderall or something else. And, you know, some people look at this, if my kid can just live another day to learn from this and not die, then that's a win. I get it. You know, it's one of those things that we don't necessarily all see eye to eye on that one, but that's the threat that our kids are facing. And to everybody's point, the education side of it, hands down, is one of the most important things. Certainly that's from the prevention side of it. The enforcement side of it, yes, there are men and women out there on the streets every day across this country doing their best to keep that stuff from hitting our streets. And that is just a small fraction of the stuff that has been seized, but it's also a small fraction of the stuff that is hitting our streets. And so to have that relationship, have that talk with our youth, the Coalition of Auburn and Lincoln Youth is one of those groups that really lead the effort on connecting with the kids and parents. And also there's a part of our underserved community that they're not having this conversation, you know, and they're not necessarily the ones calling us. And, you know, again, that's a reality that we face in law enforcement. That's a reality that our community is facing. So again, kudos to Lieutenant Morrison for the presentation and the information. So, and thank you for your support. So now we'll kick off our 2021 annual report. You know, we'll go through here. Again, you know, it's a snapshot of what the men and women of the Auburn Police Department accomplished over 2021. You know, we've already talked about our core values and our mission statement, but really, I mean, they are true professionals when it comes to trying to live by these core values. Ownership is one of those. You know, we'll talk about problems, we'll talk about issues that these folks are working with, trying to be problem solvers, not necessarily having to respond to the same issue over and over again and expecting different results, but actually, you know, putting the time and effort to help the community solve some of these problems. You know, professionalism, being respectful. I mean, just all those are part of what we are striving to do. And if you look at our mission statement, you notice there's an emphasis on the victim. You know, oftentimes you talk about cops and law enforcement, all kind of crime fighting centric with more of an emphasis on the bad guys, you know, on the criminal side of it. But we want to be more focused on getting the community and our victims the help that they need. So retirements. So we had 3 retirements last year: Lieutenant Garlock, Detective McCullough, and also our CSO, Deb Nelson. I mean, you can see there the years of service that they had and gave to the city of Auburn. You know, institutional knowledge goes out the door with some folks like this, but I'm happy to say Lieutenant Garlock is actually he is our level 1 reserve, helping us out. And Deb Nelson is back with us. She's one of our part-time CSOs. We'll keep her as long as we can doing the same thing. Detective McCullough, you know, this is one of those things we talk about employee wellness. This is a per example. Angie was, you talk about someone who is a true testament to what law enforcement is and being victim centric. That was Angie, you know, and the thing is, it was time for her. She'd seen a lot. We start talking about things that are crimes against children and, you know, the overdoses, that stuff that wears on people, you know, and kudos to her for putting in so many years, not just here, but also with state parks. And now she's enjoying her retirement. We're still trying to get her to come back when she gets, you know, enjoys her retirement, gets tired of doing nothing. But, you know, again, I mean, that's 3 folks right there that, you know, really did give everything they had to the city of Auburn. Here we go into promotions. So with retirements comes opportunities. We promoted Lieutenant Huey. He is got promoted in August of 2021. And he's been here, I mean, over 8 years. 18 years of experience. Sergeant Davis, Anthony Davis, was 4 years of law enforcement experience, 2 years with us. We promoted him in October, and then Detective Sandgren. Here's one of those examples of what a reserve officer does for the city of Auburn. He started here as a reserve officer and has promoted. I hired him on as a full-time, and then all his work and dedication. He was actually our school resource officer for some time. And then when Angie retired, he took the spot from her after a process. So awards and recognitions. So we heard a lot about life-saving, the Narcan. These are two examples of what Lieutenant Morrison was talking about. Sergeant Mike Messer. And then you had Officer Izette on two different incidences, both saving somebody using the Narcan. Another one, so you have Officer Aaron Berthelsen and Reserve Officer Korea responded to one overdose, only to find out that there was someone in another adjoining room that was overdosing, and they deployed the Narcan there. So you can see, I mean, those are some of those examples of life-saving that the officers are doing. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't necessarily get talked about. And then we have here, so this is Officer Sarah Roach. So Sarah earned the Community Service Ribbon twice last year for her efforts. The first one was actually her work on some graffiti. She coordinated with Placer County Probation to clean up some of the graffiti throughout the city. But then with COVID and everything else, kind of everything went on a standstill. But she still came to the day that they chose. She put on some plain clothes and started painting some of the walls in the city of Auburn to clean it up. And then she actually coordinated with one of our apartment complexes actually the Palm Terrace Apartments. And she coordinated an Easter egg hunt and some Easter egg or Easter festivities for the tenants in that complex. So, much as we talk about crime fighting, and those are a lot of the stats we have, this is the stuff that you can't necessarily quantify and qualify that's going on out there. Our volunteer of the year, you met him earlier today, Paul Kessler. Again, Paul has come here. You talk about someone who really hit the ground running for us, took on this role of volunteer coordinator. And, he's really reinvigorated our neighborhood watch programs, our national night out. He's working, like I said earlier, on a traffic program, kind of combination with our traffic data collector, all that good stuff. So, you talk about a guy who's really leading that effort for us, and it's been a great resource. There we have Supervisor Samantha Davis. Samantha Davis oversees our records and dispatch unit. She also led our efforts in getting into the new computer-aided dispatch and record management system. With her, her hard work, her dedication, she is the one putting together all of the paperwork, all the reports, everything that goes on behind the scenes, certainly making a lot of this stuff possible. And then Connor Johnson. Connor Johnson is our a police officer trainee currently. He's wrapping up the last couple of weeks of his academy. May 4th, I believe, or 5th, May 3rd. He will graduate the academy, and he'll start his field training program with us. We start talking about creative staffing. Connor is one of those. So he was after 3 CSO processes when I got here. Connor was the one that was selected. He has done so much for this police department. He's led the community action team efforts, our homeless efforts, coordinated with a lot of that. He's a fan favorite amongst the staff. He slid into other duties as assigned, like nobody's has done before for us. I think he's done dispatch for us. He's learned that. And so I think he's always got that smile on his face, but we're looking forward to him getting out of the academy and into field training. So he was actually our 2021 Employee of the Year, and well-deserved. Class of 2021, these are the folks we brought on last year. They're still with us. So I talked about Sergeant Neary earlier. Officer Dorr was actually a reserve officer with us. And then I made him full-time last year. Officer Silva, she came to us from the sheriff's office. And then you have Josephine Hodges, who you saw earlier. And then Allison Sudia, who came on as a dispatcher. But after some time, we slid her over to the part-time records clerk position. So this is one of those examples of the creative staffing and be able to move people. We brought people on with good character. We didn't want to lose them. And so we found opportunities where they can still continue to benefit the organization. All right, so now we get some stats and definitely got to work on a different background next time. Unless we can turn off all the lights. But you'll see there, part one statistics, so that's violent crime, the homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assaults. You can see there that violent crime is down for us, 42%. A large part of that was our aggravated assaults are down pretty significantly, I think 54%. The homicide was related to the DUI crash fatality that we had on Auburn Folsom in September. Obviously we've solved that one. The robberies we've solved as well. We have 100% solving rate on the clearance rate on that, as well as our kidnappings and assault with a deadly weapon cases. You'll notice there the total arrests 296, 73 felonies, and 196 misdemeanors. And you slide down to the bottom graph, you'll see there that's property crime. So burglary, larceny, vehicle theft, and arson. We're up 3% in that under property crimes of the UCR Part 1 crime. Property crimes, burglary, and larceny are where we certainly see that increase. And remember, for us, small numbers, big changes. And we slide on to the next stat. So you'll see we've had a 3-year trend of crime, those UCR Part 1 statistics going down. So compared to last year, we're at a decrease of 6% overall. Traffic data. So you see there, traffic stops up, citations are down, DUI arrests are up, and the collisions are down. So, traffic stops were increased about 5% over the last year, but citations were down. A lot of people, there's always those statements out there that we're out there writing traffic citations to make more, go to the city's coffers. I will tell you, writing citations and making money off that is not a good business practice. Although people pay hundreds of dollars in their citation, we get only a small fraction of that. So if anybody has an opportunity to go check out the Placer County, fines and fees and what that looks like, you'll see that funding goes all over the place and not back to us. So that being said, our goal with reducing collisions is really, our enforcement part of it is one of those things that's last. We'd rather change people's behaviors with education, or some of it's just being a presence. If people see us, they slow down, they don't run a stop sign, that's great. They don't drive DUI, that's great. If we have to use enforcement to change behavior, then that's what we do. But the goal here is ultimately to reduce DUI arrests because we have less DUIs on the road, but also reduce collisions, which we've done. Some high level just investigations. So we have 2 in-house detectives, and you'll see 242 cases went to those investigators in-house. Our MDIC interviews, which is typically related to, I know it's hard to read, my apologies. Maybe, can we dim it? Can we dim the lights a little bit? Like an eye test, A, B, A, B.
And I forgot my.
I think it's better, yeah. So MDIC interviews, typically these are cases where, this is where our investigators will work with the DA's office and other entities to do an interview. Ideally, we want to do one interview with a child. We don't want to have a child have to go through multiple interviews, like sitting down with interviewing with an officer, and then having to sit down with the detective, and then having to sit down with the DA's investigators, and then having to sit down with Child Protective Services. If we can bring the whole point of this concept was to bring all those groups together to conduct one interview and one interview in a certain manner that works best for the youth. So we've done 13 of those last year. SCARs are suspected child abuse reports. We took 70 of those last year, and those are mandated reports that we have to investigate. And then you'll see there property and evidence. We processed over 1,500 items. 43 guns were recovered. Going back to the case investigations, so the 242, we've closed 125 of those cases through arrest or exceptional means, which could be someone died or something like that, or they were deemed to be unfounded. So there's still a number of cases open, but it's those 2 investigators that continue to follow up. Our dispatch, as you heard a little bit earlier, so we are allotted 6 full-time dispatchers. We've had some turnover. We've had some vacancies that we're trying to fill, working on filling those. But you'll see out of the 911 calls, emergency calls, we received over 6,800 calls, emergency calls in 2021. And overall, they handled 32 of those 1,000 calls in the comm center. So non-emergency calls, emergency calls, outgoing calls. The text to 911 feature that we kicked off last year, so far we've used it 25 times. And then you see there, the average all calls were answered within just under 7.5 seconds. Like I mentioned earlier, again, this is the group that they not only are dispatchers, but they're also part of our records. They do all of our records. They process 407 cases at the DA's office, which include 296 of those arrests. So they do good work. Very proud of our team. Although they only get 1 week, we try to highlight them as much as we can throughout the year. Code enforcement. A lot of the discussion about code enforcement and what they do with weed abatement. This year, certainly in partnership with our fire partners. So we did 9 weed abatement cases this year with the code enforcement. One of those resulted in the actual abatement of it. The other ones were all notices were made or citations were issued. They responded to 97 cases, issued 35 administrative citations, 7 notices of violations, and they completed 1 abatement for a different property. Placer County Animal Control. So our animal control, we handle most of the stuff in-house. Our officers, our CSOs responded to 307 animal control calls. What's that? No, he wasn't moving. Oh, yeah. So Placer County Animal Control stats. So every quarter we get the stats for the contract we have with the county animal control is a little over $70,000 annually this year. And you can see intake of animals was 69. 48 of those were strays. And then the outcomes there, you can see adoptions 36, euthanized were 6, and then returned to their owner was 15. A big part of the strays and found dogs being 48, goes back to people registering their animals, putting a chip in them so we can track and get them home sooner. We find that most of our costs associated with the Placer County Animal Control is because those animals that are associated with the city of Auburn are staying in the shelter longer. So if we could figure out ways to reduce the time the animals are spending in the shelter, we could see that cost be reduced. And here's our volunteers. So we had 8 volunteers join us last year. I highlight one of them that were here, Scott Birkenstock. He's actually going to be our level 3 reserve. He finished up the Mod 3 Academy, so he'll be here as the level 3 reserve for us. Kind of as a side note, his wife is the regional coordinator for Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, which is, again, a huge partner for us. Back to zero. This is our tobacco enforcement efforts, working with Placer County Health and Human Services. The program continues to be very fluid. The county lost their funding for this, so we've kind of taken on a little bit more work towards this, but we've issued 58 citations for diversion. And in 2021, we had 3 diversion classes hosted, and then we had 24 of those kids participate in the classes. And then staffing challenges. We talked about this a little bit earlier. You can see there the chart on the right. 0 to 3 years, 15 of our current staff now has been here under 3 years. Another 5 has been here 5 years or under. Now, not all that's necessarily years of experience in law enforcement, but that's the number of years that they've been here in the city. It's a very young team. And, if we feel like, how about there, we have 3 vacancies for the full-time employee sworn side of it. And same thing, we currently have the 3 vacancies for the non-sworn, the professional staff. You add those 6 into this, even I think that percentage goes up to in the 63%. So that's kind of where we are with the staffing perspective. We set out to do a couple things. Crime fighting last year was the development and implementation of a crime reduction model, homeless strategic plan, increased our neighborhood watch goals, and then technology. I know some people heard me talk about this crime and traffic reduction model. We called it Impact. implementing meaningful proactive approaches to Auburn's crime and traffic. We all love our acronyms, but when you have that, we start looking at where are we going? How best are we going to use our resources? Other cities, New York, the program called CompStat, which was computer statistics, it started looking at using the information and where they were often referred to as cops on dots. So where all the crime was happening, that's where they're going to send their resources. Here, very similar. We just don't have 1,000 cops to throw at one problem. But what we started using after July of 2021, we had our CAD RMS system for a full year at that point. We started identifying where are we having the biggest issues, certainly from a quality of life issue. What we found was July, we rolled into, said, Highway 49 from Margaret Mine to Interstate 80 really accounts for over half of our collisions. And so we said, hey, as a department, we're going to focus on that stretch. And we did. We saw a reduction of collisions along Highway 49. You'll even notice that some of the tactics we used was putting a car up there, signage. We also use social media to let people know that we were doing that. Again, it goes back to education. If we can just do this, do our work just by educating the public and not have to make traffic stops, not have to issue tickets, then that's a win for us. And so that's what we did in September. We did the same thing in August, September, school starting. So we said we need to focus on schools, which we did. We were in and around the schools. And then at the end of September, we had the DUI fatality. A driver, young woman, 25 years old, had a 0.25 blood alcohol level. She was over 3 times the legal limit. So as a department, we said, we need to focus on some of these DUIs and start working with our businesses. So you can see there, we made 75 DUI arrests in 2021. I've been to a number of meetings where it made the comments from the public were kind of like, well, yeah, it makes me feel like I can't even have a beer and go drive, right? And that's not even the message. The message is, out of the 75 DUI arrests we made, the average blood alcohol was a 0.22. So, we are getting the men and women that are out there. I mean, they're getting drunk drivers off our street and they're protecting people. And you can see there, 25% of our misdemeanor arrests were actually related to DUI arrests. So continue to work on that, and we'll continue to identify those problem areas within our city. And our social media program, Facebook, we continue to use all the social media platforms to get the message out, connect with our community, and just talk about the good work and the issues facing our community. And then here, again, continue to report a concern. This is our website. It's on the city's website. It's the Citizen Request Tracker. We talk about the community using this, and you kind of make out we've received 55 requests via the online reporting. 19 were related to illegal camps, 1 narcotic tip, 4 vandalisms, and then 31 crime tips. And again, that will be the conclusion of the presentation.
Very good.
And that's the get in touch page. If you can see it, you can email us or give us a call.
Thank you very much. Before I open up for questions, can you give in 20 words or less, give us a little education on the police operational
Problem-oriented policing?
Problem-oriented policing.
So 20 words or less?
Maybe 30.
Problem-oriented policing is just another strategy to addressing specific problems in the community, focused on intent of, again, not just focused on using police department staff, but the community as well.
And generally, what does that require? Is it two officers and a supervisor? And you can expand a little bit.
Okay. So obviously problem-oriented policing itself is a philosophy. It's a strategy on how do we best address community issues. So you have community-oriented policing, right, which is really talks about how we engage with the community. But then problem-oriented policing is using your resources to deal with a specific problem. So, like for us, our efforts for DUI, our efforts are a problem-oriented policing philosophy. It's a strategy because the goal here is not just to use the officers making DUI arrests, but like for us, we reached out to the business community. We've met with a number of bar and restaurant owners to identify How do we best work with them? How do we best serve them? For example, is bringing alcohol beverage control in and saying, hey, let's put some training on for your servers, your bartenders, so we can recognize over serving. And so that's one part of that problem. Two is using programs like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, to help us get the message out. And so now MAD's going to take on that role to help us address the DUI side of it as well. And then there's the officers going out there being, at those times when we're having DUIs, go to the bars, be a presence there, try to deter someone from driving drunk. But the thing about it is we can't rely on law enforcement to be dealing with the problem long-term because we don't have the resources. We're a Band-Aid. And so we can focus on something for a short period of time. We can have a positive impact to that, change the behaviors. But as soon as we go away from that, we know that eventually that problem is going to come back. And so using other resources. Another example is Highway 49. We can't be on Highway 49 every day, all day to keep people from falling too closely, from speeding, from being distracted while on their cell phones. But we can be a presence for a short period of time. We can show our efforts. But at some point in time, we need maybe changing engineering side of it, if that's possible. Doing all those things to put in a long-term solution that's not us.
Do I have questions? Good. Councilman Spokely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, thanks very much for the presentation. Yeah, use different colors next time.
It looked good on the computer, sir.
Couple of questions. I noted the animal control slide. You mentioned that our contract, and I think you said it was somewhere around $66,000 a year.
It's about 70,000 this year.
70,000. And did I hear right that we dropped off 65 or 66 animals?
There were 69 animals that went from, all year last year, went to the shelter.
So we're over $1,000 per animal
Yes.
for that service. When we last talked about this, when their contract came before us for renewal, we talked about, are there other options for the city of Auburn? Because there was a significant increase in what they were charging us on a cost per animal basis. It'd be interesting to look back into that to see if there are other external options for us, neighboring jurisdictions that also have animal control. Just something, I guess, to think about. The other thing that we invested in pretty significantly many years back, and even our business districts invested in it, are the cameras, and a few of the cameras are equipped with license plate readers.
Yes.
Are those still active, functioning? I see the little blue lights flashing at the various locations around town. How useful are those for your officers and your detectives?
So they've been very useful, certainly since I've been here. We talked about some of those homicides that we had a couple years ago, the one that was on Harrison. We actually found the plate using the license plate readers.
Okay.
We are in the midst right now of changing how what the model looks like. We actually have a vendor that we're working with to get additional cameras on. We would add 6 cameras to the city. So we're looking at changing vendors because we found that this new vendor does a better job, has better equipment. And the new vendor actually will allow communities like HOAs and everything else, they'll buy cameras, do the install, and actually we would have access to those LPRs.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that update. And one last question, as it relates to some of the crime stats, the property theft, how pervasive are catalytic converter thefts in our community? I know my business, we have a large fleet and we get hit all the time. And every time one of our vehicles gets hit, it's like an $8,000 cost to replace it. They're all, they take the vehicle out of service for like 3 or 4 weeks because they're all back ordered. All the cat converters are back ordered. How pervasive is it?
So I don't have the numbers, but early on last year, we were hit with a number of catalytic converter thefts. Actually, one of our injured officers was doing a lot of follow-up and working with a lot of partner agencies and working with the FBI on some of these cases that they were coming down. So early on, it was early on last year. And right now, we're actually starting to see an increase as well. So I think just a couple of weeks ago, I've seen a couple catalytic converter thefts hit my emails. So.
Okay.
I don't, right now, I don't believe we're getting hit as hard as some of the other uh, communities in our region, but nevertheless, I mean, having one of those hit is an issue. Big part of the catalytic conversion, a lot of people are talking about doing things like etching, which is all great to help for crime prevention. What we're finding is they're not going to your normal recycler, right? I mean, they're packing these up, they're shipping them off. We know that they're going to places in Sacramento and then being shipped across the country, overseas.
Right.
So,
okay. Thanks again, Chief. Appreciate the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I really appreciated the amount of data that you had in the presentation. I know that we've talked a long time about the new system to really allow you to track that. I was curious though of one thing. A lot of your numbers showed a 3-year comparison. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2019 is not part of the RIMS collection, or was it?
it was not. It's data that we're using based on the old system we had, and it was actually the first report I gave
Okay.
here. So that was where we were using leads. So it'll be interesting because 19 was all leads. Then you had 20, which was half leads, half rims. And then you had all of 2021, which we saw today. Next year, we're going to go to a whole new reporting mechanism. So currently we report on a summary reporting of the uniform crime stats reports. So then we're going to this thing called CYBERS and NIBERS, which is the California incident-based reporting system. So it actually paints a different picture of what's going crimes out there.
So the only reason I ask, are we looking at apples and oranges, or are you confident that those are equal comparisons, or the fact that pre-RIMS, RIMS, and then going to a standardized state national system, are they apples to apples?
Well, I would say so when we're talking about UCR, because that's a standardized reporting. If we're looking at a lot of other stuff, then I probably would say, no, it's not apples to apples. But UCR is, again, it's a summary reporting. So every month we have to report back to DOJ on those specific crimes. So I would say that those are apples to apples.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification there. On the conversation about the dogs, just a few thoughts here, because $1,000 a dog, is a little much. And so I think looking at a place of where we can tighten that down. I know that you guys do a really good job of posting dogs. Maybe even that picture was kind of an example, but when you do take in a dog, oftentimes it gets posted on Facebook, and I've often seen, and I don't know specifics, but it seems like it almost always makes its way home. Could that be a more regular routine, that before it goes automatically to the county shelter, that somewhere within the city, whether it's the city's page or the police page, that dog gets pushed out there? Because that one free post may save us, may save us in the future when they go to calculate our costs, save us some dollars.
So it is. I think it really is a standard practice of ours. I can tell you it's not always the greatest practice, because that does end up having an animal running through the station, or somewhere. And so, I mean, it's a practice, probably not always the greatest one though. But to your point, yes, our goal is to reunify that animal with their property owner as soon as we can. I mean, for a lot of people, that's their child.
Yeah, of course. So on the chipping, animal chipping, we don't require that, do we? And I guess there would be a question of, is there any and this is a question for Gary. Gary, are you familiar with other cities that may require, as part of the licensing, that the dog be chipped, or that somehow the license be trackable? And I'll follow up. I guess that's the question. Is there precedent to have an ordinance that would require that as part of your registration?
Yes. Yeah, there are cities that require that, and to go into much more detail in the application process and tracking and collar and a more robust licensing system.
Well, I guess I would just ask, I know that that's one of many, many priorities on the list. And I know this because since I've owned a dog, I've only paid the initial and never been asked to pay renewals because we don't track it like that. Well, you could show me my invoice. I will be happy to pay you. But my point is maybe that when we update that system, that there's an opportunity to also update the ordinance so that we're making sure as dogs are registered that they're chipped to help reduce some of those costs. And maybe even if there's the opportunity to partner with a veterinarian, and maybe I don't fully understand the chipping process, but to have a free chipping day, where everyone brings their animals And that, I don't know what the cost of that chip is, but that might be cheaper than, the costs that we're paying to animal control. Again, understanding that animal control is a methodological dollar amount that is backdated years past, so we won't see a savings immediately, but just, I would ask us to look into that a little bit, because that is a large dollar amount. You posted today crime stats on your
Yes.
Facebook. Whoever did that, it looks amazing. If you haven't seen it, very clean, very easy to follow. Will that be a routine thing that we can expect to see?
We'll try to make it routine. That was one of the ideas from staff. It was their suggestion, maybe we can put our weekly stats on there. I said, go ahead, someone's got to do it. And it looked like this today, someone made it happen.
Yeah,
So-
well, it looked great. So thank them. As you know, as part of the Homeless Transient Task Force, one of the things that we identified was just the need to have, tracking of crimes. This report is great, but that weekly really, I think, got out there to the public. So kudos to whoever did that. And I definitely would urge us to make that a little bit more routine. My last question, then I have a quick comment to jump on what the Mayor said about POP. Complaints. You and I have talked a little bit about, issues in different areas. What is it that you need from us as a community to help you in some of these areas that people are seeing crimes or issues? Obviously, we've talked before about illegal camps, the discussion that was made about crime happening in the school park preserve. What is it that you need from us and residents to help you enforce or know about these crimes?
That's a great question. I know we've talked about it before. You mentioned data. There's a lot of data. We operate as a data-informed organization, right? Not necessarily data-driven like a lot of places talk, but data-informed, because we're going to look at this data and say, where's our next problem going to be? Today's problem is not going to be tomorrow's problem. And so when we get there, it's where do we need to start taking these resources and how do we need to best be doing that? And to be honest, I see this stuff on Facebook, but we're not watching Facebook. We're not all part of the different Auburn area groups that are posting a camp or posting an RV or putting information about School Park Preserve. That, as nice as it is to get the information out and lets the community know, it doesn't necessarily let us know. We take that data seriously. If someone's going to start telling us, hey, I walk by School Park Reserve, this is what I'm seeing, this is what's happening, then we're going to start having to change gears and start moving our resources to that next problem. I mentioned earlier Highway 49. Highway 49, everybody talks about it, right? The crashes, the red lights, all those things. But if you're only talking about that on Facebook, that's not helping us capture how best to use our resources. Calling us, letting us know. And I know a lot of people would say, well, it's too, it's a trivial issue. I don't want to let the police department know. I don't want someone to come out necessarily and do those things. And that's fine. I appreciate that stance, and they can tell us that at the same time. But if we start seeing phone calls and stuff come in and say, hey, I got a problem here, I got a problem here, I got a problem here. Now we're going to say, okay, we obviously have a problem and we need to change gears, because as much as the community thinks we know everything that's going on, we don't know everything that's going on. And it's typically our community that first sees the issue. And what I found just in my career, it takes about 6 months for someone to start getting mad, right? The problem has gone on for 6 months. The expectation is that we know about it. The expectation is that a neighbor must have called about it. Somebody must have let us know. And, we go back and we look and say, well, we got one call, right? One call is not going to change our direction when somewhere else is getting more calls. And so using that information, especially if the expectation is, hey, I'm just letting you know, then let us know. We will put that in our CAD or in our RMS system. And then on a monthly basis, when we pull those stats, we'll look at that and say, hey, you know what? This is what's going on. This is where we need to focus our attention.
What's your normal staffing right now of patrol out on the streets?
So we talk about, just kind of as a snapshot, we're authorized 4 sergeants and 8 officers, so 12 total. If you break that down into 4 teams, it's 1 sergeant and 2 officers per team. And so that's a 3 people during a 12-hour shift. But the reality is already we're down 2 bodies, right, in patrol. So now that means it's 1 officer and 1 sergeant for 2 of those teams. And then we try to overlap and bring in a swing shift to offset that. So like I've said before, Typically, we have one officer and one sergeant, and on a good time, we have two officers and one sergeant working the street at any one time. And that doesn't even take in consideration necessarily the administrative stuff that they're responsible for doing. And so that's where we are typically with staffing.
What I'm hearing you say is there are 2 to 3 officers on the street, but there are 14,000 residents and another 1,000 employees and business owners. They're your eyes and ears, but they need a call so that you can track that data that there's a problem.
Yes.
And I obviously specific bringing up, you and I, and the mayor had a good conversation about the school park preserve and about the not just perceived crime that's occurring there, but the actual crime, but the number of calls still is minimal, though on Facebook, a lot of us are seeing a lot of discussion and not just seeing it, but they're reporting it. But like you said, they're reporting it on Facebook, which is good. I mean, it's good. It's a tool for the police department to get the word out of a problem, but somehow we need to loop back the police department by calling and complaining.
Yes. And
So sorry.
because
go ahead.
Facebook we don't monitor Facebook all 24/7 either.
Yeah, I know. The comment probably all of us get is, we send you and the city manager a lot of text messages of things that we see, but calling seems like it's the best way. For the council, I just want to quickly reiterate my support as we get into budget development. This problem-oriented policing concept and idea, I think we really need to talk about it when we get into budget development discussions, because I really think your impact model, and maybe we'll have time to expand on what that is, but I really like that, it's not just random issues of the day. You're using data to decide today or this month is DUIs 49 and pair it with other external items that are happening. Right now, the school park preserve, obviously, there's a lot of focal points. So being able to be flexible of moving what that problem is. And so I definitely hope that we can see, as tight as budgets are, some kind of budget proposal or discussion about a problem-oriented policing, a POP team that can take what was CAT originally for camps and homeless, and bring it up a notch to continue dealing with other issues. Code enforcement, obviously, even being a component of that as well. We have a lot of ordinances that are in place that a code enforcement could be doing. So please, Chief, thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation. I look forward to, I know the projector here is not the best color for us to see it, but when it goes online, because I think our community is going to really appreciate the data and that shows the trend. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Gowden.
Yes, thank you very much. I echo the comments of my colleagues. And just to reiterate on the animal control, I actually was going to suggest, I was nodding to Gary. Yes, that we suggest that we revise our ordinance because we can mandate that pets be microchipped. And until that time, we can certainly do an educational effort, and we do so much outreach on Facebook. Maybe we can do a Facebook about, remember, it's important to microchip your pet. We can't mandate it till the ordinance, but I'd like to see that as well. I did want to, again, I wanted to thank you for your report. Great data, great job trying to keep this short because it is getting late, but I really do appreciate all that you are doing. I wondered if you thought about traffic calming. We talk about traffic calming and speeding and things of that nature. I've seen some jurisdictions that have like a permanent speed radar, like on a light pole that's fixed there so that it's always on. We use that mobile device, but have we ever looked into that?
We've looked at it kind of anecdotally just to see what options are out there. But
I wonder
typically-
I don't know if they're really expensive, but I mean, I know, like I said, we have the mobile devices, but that's something that's, right there in your neighborhood and you can see that you're going or on 49 or whatever. So, but that's a traffic calming device that I've seen recently that I thought I would raise to you. Really appreciate all your efforts on the DUI front, the partnership that you have with MAD. I'm incredibly impressed. Love the videos that you're doing, especially the one with the transit. That was great. So keep it up on those efforts. I think, we're definitely making a difference and I really do appreciate that. Other than that, I really didn't have any other questions. Again, we've had a lot of discussion on this, but really want to thank you and look forward to additional discussion as we move forward in the budget process with the different types of policing and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a couple of different questions. In the news, we've seen a lot of issues with guns, related to guns, and you indicated that you recovered 43 illegal guns.
Not necessarily illegal guns, just guns in general. So if someone's taken on a 5150 welfare institution code mental health issue, we might seize their guns. If it's a domestic violence case, we might seize their guns. So there's other cases that it's not necessarily illegal. There's a lot of information, information out there talking about ghost guns. As far as I'm aware, we haven't seen any here.
Okay.
Definitely something we can follow up on.
Okay, I'd be interested in those kind of statistics. I noticed in the city of San Jose, they instituted gun liability insurance. Would you find that helpful?
I don't know enough about it.
Okay, maybe you can
Sure, we could look at
report
that.
back a little bit
Sure.
on that. I think it'd be to see if it actually works and to see if that's something we need in our community for us to look at. Then also some communities have also have money to that I think the police department distributes for security systems that you can at least have some opportunity to give some businesses or some homes that need security systems, be it sophisticated or not so sophisticated. Is that something that you might know about or want to put some effort toward?
As far as helping people purchase,
Well, like there's might be some grants, but I saw it, I believe, I wasn't sure if it was the city of San Jose, but one community had a pot of money that was set aside for security. And so, I would imagine it would be an opportunity for you to go around and to businesses that are having reoccurring issues to help them.
so to your point, yes, I mean, certain like homeowners associations and different groups like that, oftentimes will pool some money together to identify, hey, how do we take security measures?
Mhm.
And from a SEPTED perspective, we would absolutely work with any part of our community, whether it's a business community or HOA, to identify best practices and help them identify what security system would work best for them. But yeah, through our SEPTED program, absolutely, we'd work with those groups.
Good. Okay. That's important. And that goes along with, I think, what my fellow councilmen or women have been saying, and what I truly believe would be very helpful and I would like to see. We've had a lot of success. You've given the homeless report, and we've had a lot of success with the CAT team. And the CAT team, the philosophy and I think the success is oriented around prevention. I think, as you've indicated, you can't arrest people and then expect behaviors to change, but you have to get to the source of the problem. And that's what I would call it, police on patrol, problem-oriented policing. Prevention, I think, is key. And I would like to see resources go toward that, because we do really have some major issues that maybe do not show up in the data. We do have the park that has, there's an element down there that where drugs are going on. There's vandalism. I walked from the perfect parking place in Auburn Fairgrounds to Lower Town, which is really a block away. But if you go there, it is quite a frightening experience because there is vandalism all over, and it's not nice. There's, it would be an opportunity if we had a situation where we had some officers who were able to reach out and try to get to the underlying problem of the kids in the park, because they're there and you can arrest them, but I think you said it, they'll just go to the next part. I think it's important that we have some sort of opportunity where we have more officers. There's 2 of you, maybe 3 at the most, that are on the street. But if you have an opportunity to have an officer that could be down in the park talking to the kids and trying to get to the underlying issue, send them back to their parents, send them to school, get them into resources, I think that would be really be helpful for our community. I've had people call me about people speeding up and down streets, and you probably have too. And it's the same people, you know, you can again arrest them, but they're just going to be doing it. There has to be, if we have a team that can get to the crux of the problem, we could help them, just like you do with the CAT team. So I would like to see, again, in our budget, more resources to go toward that. You know, whatever else you think would be helpful for your team and your department. You know, so that's all I have to say on that. And I'm not sure if there's anyone else. I forgot to ask about public comment. Anyone here, public comment?
Madam Mayor, I was just going to mention, we've talked quite a bit about getting folks, you know, to call the department to notify them of issues. But let's not forget that you have that computer, the complaint form online.
Yes.
And, you know, so people that may feel uncomfortable calling, which I could totally understand that they don't want to get to dispatch or what have you, utilize that complaint form. And maybe we can kind of put that out there on Facebook too, that, hey, you see something, you want to report something, don't want to call, use the form, because that's going to get to you as well. And it's, I don't know how many people use it, but
Like I said, I think we had 55 last year
55.
in
Okay.
total, but the vandalism is a perfect example. You know, going on your phone, very easily accessible right there from your phone. Hit the button that says reporting vandalism, and it does go to us. It goes to our via email, goes to all of our dispatchers and some other folks. That call gets entered into the CAD system, and we follow up.
And
as
it's so
normal.
easy. I mean, so you have your phone with you and you see something, you can just, so maybe just, you know, maybe educating the public a little bit more about that form, and hopefully people will use that more. And maybe as council members as well, because we see the same things on Facebook too. And, you know, it's kind of frustrating because then we're expected to address issues that are on Facebook that are just out to the universe. But, you know, maybe also, you know, letting folks know, hey, if you see something, let's report it on the form. If you don't want to call them, you know, that's a way to get it directly to the police department, get it in there for data, and then we can respond accordingly. So, and actually faster probably than waiting for one of us to accidentally stumble across something and then texting John, you know.
So then I just want to follow up. Then what you're doing is you're doing a wonderful job. And I think, and I do think that with what the resources you have, you're doing a great job. And going into the bars, again, I think is one of the best things you can do. Again, if we had more resources, you would have people at the bars at closing time to help people out. And I think Jackie Weston, who's sitting in the back, and she lives in Auburn. Oh, never mind.
Mhm.
No, yeah, and I appreciate that. Yeah.
And the chamber. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're right. To answer that question, you're absolutely right. I mean, putting it out, making it
Yeah,
a frequent Facebook post.
Yeah.
But to kind of the question of wasting an officer's time, the reality is, you know, we might not be able to make it out there in 15 minutes, right? We might not be able to make it out there in an hour, but knowing about it, maybe an officer drives by and on the way to a call, he can deal with it quickly, or she can deal with it quickly, but then at least we know about it going down.
And also for the record, no public comment from your seat in the future. Please come up to the dais. Thank you.
Yes.
I tried to tell her.
It can't be recorded for the perseverance of the
So
record.
with that, then I just want to thank Chief Canan very much for your report and very, very helpful. And again, we hope you come back with a nice request on the budget. So, and with that, city manager report, and I believe
Smiling.
we will,
We
we'll-
don't have a blank check, chief.
we'll forego with the committee reports because we've been here quite a while.
Really quick, budget's in process right now. Budgets came in from the departments last week. This week, they go into the overall budget. We meet with all the departments next week, and we will have a draft of the budget to the council for a very robust conversation on May 9th. I include something to the council regarding some of the Placer County development that is moving forward. I'm meeting with the county CAO to go over that, and I will schedule a 2x2 with the council and our supervisors regarding that. Last week, we met with businesses from both Old Town and downtown regarding outdoor dining. I'm going to be bringing a proposal on April 28th regarding maybe a next step. I will tell you that we're going to pull some money down out of the ARPA funds towards working with the businesses and property owners regarding outdoor dining proposals so look for that. I'm going to be working with our 2 school districts in town to have a 2x2x2 where we can set up regular quarterly meetings with the city and both of our educational districts in town. The Auburn Unified School District, we met with them last week. They are putting together a committee to kind of go over some of the issues and cuts that they're making. They will ask for a city council representative to sit on that, so I'll bring that to the council. The SB 1383 stuff, our Recology franchise is in development. There's a lot to it. We're working through it, but expect that we'll have at least some semblance of the outline of a franchise, either the second meeting in May or the first meeting in June. And then finally, Thursday, I'm going to be up in Paradise. There were some of us that were part of a team that were literally on the ground in Paradise a week after the campfire. And many of us spent a good part of the next year and a half assisting the town of Paradise. There was a group of us that spent a lot of time helping them out in various functions. So the Sacramento Valley City Managers Group, we're going to go up there. It's going to kind of be a reunion. We've got some folks. We were both in Chico and in Paradise. Chico was probably impacted harder than Paradise was in many respects, but we're working up. We're going to go up there and see some of the progress that they've made, and it's an interesting story. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book, there is a lot to that, and so I'll be up there on Thursday, and I'll report back. Interesting stuff. So, and that's my report.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Adjourn.
Seen this, by the way, the agreement with Gabe Mendez. I know you spoke with Angela about it.